of what this lecture and the following workshops are going to be about. The quest for the Holy Grail is really a code name for something else. It's a code name for humanity's search for its own soul and for its own origins and for understanding its place in the universe. It's the quest for the eternal self, to find out if that's real or not. The quest for the Holy Grail has been a part of our legends throughout our history for many, many hundreds of years. But there's many things that have not been understood about what this quest is about. Now, some of you, this is an interesting group because some of you are people who have followed with me through numerous workshops in the last year, and others are just coming in for the first time and have never heard of me before. For those of you who have never heard of me before, my published name has been Anna Hayes. My actual name is Ashana Dean, and the Dean came because I was recently married to a wonderful man named Michael Dean. So that's who I am, for those of you who don't know. Now, for those of you who don't know me at all, I've authored 2 books in 1999 called the Voyager series books. These books deal with advanced metaphysical training, is the easiest way to look at it. I have had over probably 28 years now of training in metaphysics. It started when I was a child, and it was a very specialized type of metaphysical training. It wasn't your bargain variety that you can go pick up a book and look through from a bookstore. When I bring these workshops to people, which I've only been doing for about 1.5 years, I'm doing it not because this is what I'd particularly like to do for my livelihood. I'm doing it because I have been given material and information that is extremely pertinent to the evolution of ourselves as individuals in the current time, but also to our species. If it were not for the fact that I have such a heartfelt commitment to truth and defining what that is and sharing what I find, I wouldn't be doing this. It's not something I particularly enjoy. In fact, I dropped out of college because I had a public speaking course, and I got an A on the written paper, but when it was time to get up in front of the class, I resigned from college. So, for those of you who don't know me and haven't been to any of my workshops or anything, I found that I was capable of talking, which was a nice thing to do. So I can speak when necessary. But it isn't something that I decided to have a career in or that I decided to do for the money or anything like that. I'm here simply to share the information that I have. And some of you, the information will resonate with. Others of you, you may find it strange, because what I can talk to you about tonight will only be a tiny, tiny bit of the paradigm of spirituality and science that the work that I have come to produce represents. There's a huge body of work that has been produced in the last 2-year period. There are 2 books, but there are many handbooks. There have been over a dozen full-day workshop presentations, each on different subject matter. And it's a constant, ongoing amount of data that's coming through. So for the people who aren't familiar with me, please try to take in context what's being said tonight as just a little bit of a teaser or a taster of some of the things that we explore through the Azurite Temple. I'd like to talk just for a moment about the Azurite Temple itself. What is the Azurite Temple? First of all, no, we're not a cult, and no, we're not Moonies, okay? Because a lot of people say, oh, it's one of those temple things. You know? Well, I have no interest at all in being anything like that, nor having an organization that I'm a part of be anything like that. The Azurite Temple of the Melchizedek Cloister was incorporated in November of 1999. It was done so because through my spiritual guidance, I was asked to do this, not for myself, but to provide a place. And it's really a place in mind and heart more than a place in physicality, because we don't have a building that's called the Azurite Temple, not yet. It was meant to be a place where people who have interest in honest metaphysical pursuit, who are very often shunned by traditional religious perspectives and called evil and all sorts of things because they have a questioning mind that wants to incorporate science and spirituality together. There are a lot of people that are part of what's called the New Age movement in our culture that resonate to non-dogmatic spiritual pursuit. And the one thing they don't have, they have that right, but the one thing they don't have is an actual place to be a part of, where there's other like-minded people, where there's no dues or fees, or you don't have to be any certain way. There's no pope to tell you you're bad or evil. There's just a group of people who have camaraderie in their ideas and in their quest for the Holy Grail within themselves, for that vessel of eternal spirit that moves every one of us. So Azurite Temple was incorporated to give to people of the New Age movement or the Old Age movement. It doesn't matter what movement you're a part of, because anybody can be a part of or learn things from and not be a part of Azurite Temple. It's here for you and for anybody else who wants to learn advanced metaphysical training that incorporates scientific perspective and spiritual perspective. It's here to provide some of the things that are lacking in the free spiritual movement, where, yes, freedom is important. It's better than, going to church and being told you're a sinner and being told you're bad and being told you're damned. It's better to just roam around and say, well, I feel God's presence with me or Spirit's presence with me. But there's a lack of community that happens within the New Age movement, where what if you are a family and you want your child baptized? If you happen to say, well, excuse me, I'm into metaphysics and, if you're going to a Catholic church, would you baptize my child? Well, only if you agree to teach our dogma and nothing else. This is what happens with traditional religious organizations. They basically have a set of ideas and dogma, and if you don't agree to basically sell your soul to them and make sure your children are raised in that tradition and all of that, if you question the doctrine and choose pieces of that doctrine but pieces of others, you will usually have a hard time getting simple things that are meaningful, like spiritual baptisms or spiritual or legal marriages, a place where you can just be yourself and whatever it is you choose to believe spiritually, you're respected for that. As long as you can respect others who may have ideas that are different from you, you will get respect from the organization that is coming to be known as Azurite Temple. It's a place where spirituality and science and people that want to mend those conflicts within themselves can come and explore. There's no obligation. There's no dogma, which is kind of nice. We don't have a list of 10, 20, or 30 commandments. We don't have a list of you have to's and you can'ts. There's no lists like that, because it's not any church's or temple's job to tell you how to have your relationship with Spirit. The people who are part of this organization respect that. They respect your personal right to have a relationship with Source, God, Allah, whatever you want to call that great Spirit in the sky. The reason I've dedicated my life and any type of resources that I have, my personal resources, for the last 2 years I've spent usually between 14 and 17 hours a day on the computer producing material to put in books, to put in handbooks, just to share the data that I know with people so they can help find that connection within themselves, so they don't have to be manipulated anymore by dogma. If you want one word of what the Azurite Temple, the Melchizedek Cloister, stands for, it is freedom. Freedom is a birthright that every one of us have. And it is something that is very, very precious in this culture because we don't have a lot of it. In America, we think we have a lot of it. But if you really look at what you do with your days and why you do it, are you really doing what you'd like to do? People wouldn't have to take vacations to get away from the rest of their life if they were happy with the fact that every day they could wake up and do what they wanted to do. Freedom is a limited commodity in this three-dimensional world right now. But there are ways to progressively increase your ability to have that. And it comes through finding yourself. You find yourself through Spirit. And if you don't want to believe in a spirit that's higher up and above you, that's okay. Just believe in the Spirit that's within you, that gives you your consciousness, that part of you. Freedom is what this temple stands for. So for the people, particularly the people of Sarasota, there's a few people here from Sarasota. They've never heard of me before, and I live in this community. I'm kind of like alien to the community. Where'd she come from? I would like them especially to know. And also the people who've come from afar, from different states, who don't know me at all. I would just like you to know what the basic principles that we stand for are. Freedom, respect, reverence, love, camaraderie, and a quest for honest truth as far as the nature of the human condition and what is truly ours to be and to give. That's what we stand for. So, now that that's said, I'll get on to the subject of the lecture. Now, I titled the lecture, Mysteries of the Holy Grail and Other Fabled Oddities. Okay, I'm not going to give a dissertation on the chronological history of the Holy Grail as it's written down in the history books from the King Arthur legends and all that kind of stuff. The Holy Grail quest concept was a part of medieval times. It was a part of the early formation of the Christian churches. It was a quest for power that was believed to be found through spirit. Now, the quest for the Holy Grail has to do with our present time. And most people don't realize this. What does an ancient Grail quest have to do with contemporary 2000, 2001? And particularly, what does it have to do with Sarasota, Florida? There's a direct connection. And this is what this lecture is about. What is the connection between the quest for the Holy Grail that's been a part of our legends for hundreds and hundreds of years and the location of Sarasota, Florida? They seem completely divorced from each other. That separation begins to come together when we start to understand a little bit about what a Grail quest is. So I'll talk a little bit about that first. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about pre-ancient cultures and the possibilities of what they might have been. Now, the Grail quest, as I explained a little bit before, was really an expression within the medieval mind and before of the desire to find eternal life, immortality, the power of the gods, to be one with the power of Source. In medieval times, it was translated into a political quest for power. And it really resulted in a bunch of very nasty things that are historically recorded. The Crusades were part of that. Witch burnings were part of that. If we look at the history that was put down by the formation of the Church of Rome in the early days of Christianity, and what was done to groups of individuals who had different ideas because they had sets of ancient records that told them differently than what the church was teaching. If you saw what the church did to those people, it could make you shudder. In this day and age, we can talk about the quest for spirit, which is the quest for your own empowerment in spirit. A part of every one of us knows that we came from somewhere. There's a part of every one of us that somewhere, no matter how conditioned we are in the scientific paradigm or in the atheist paradigm, there's a part of us that has that ache and that longing and that silent knowing that somewhere in there, there is something magical about the fact that you exist. There is some place that you came from to get here, that you were somebody before you came here. And that doesn't necessarily mean you had another body. That's not what I'm talking about. This isn't a lecture on reincarnation. It's simply saying that there is an eternal presence that deep inside of yourself you can get in touch with. There's a part of you that knows, a higher part of your own consciousness, that knows what we see out here is not the only reality. And the things that we're taught out here can very often limit us from finding that rest of ourself. That rest of ourself is the beginning of opening the Holy Grail and reclaiming the powers, the power of immortality, let's say, or immortality of spirit. I'm not going to be able to promise you that if you follow the particular master's level of teachings that we give on metaphysics, that you'll be able to turn into an immortal by the end of this century or by the end of the next, and that you won't have to go through the usual transition processes of dying. Some people might be able to. Most people won't be able to do that this lifetime. But there is a part of every one of us that is eternal, right now, always has been, always will be. This is the part that if you go through the natural death transition, you will find once you disengage from the genetic code of the body. You will find a station of consciousness that, wow, I'm still here. How do I know this? Because I had a near-death experience when I was 18. And I found out something I kind of already knew. Because from the time I was a child, I had something called open fetal memory. I remembered the entire process of moving my consciousness into a fetal body. I remember the process of being in my mother's womb and what that felt like. And I remembered her from knowing her in other places as well. I had conscious memory, a stream of consciousness that came through with me from a state of being non-manifest as living, sentient, eternal consciousness, moving into the body and through the body, into a baby body, and feeling it's like lights out, and all of a sudden you lose 90% of yourself when you go into fetal integration. All of a sudden, you're in a very small package that can't pull in a lot of memory. And that's what we all start as. I had my early memories of the fetal integration process reconfirmed when I was 18. And I had a near-death experience where I found myself, again, completely out of body. And it was like one of the classics. But before the classics were all over the TVs and in the books and things, there was a dark tunnel, and there was light at the end of it. When I got to the end of the dark tunnel, and there was light, there was no relatives that greeted me. There were some very strange-looking beings that I'd never seen before that greeted me. It's like, oh boy. Yeah. But I watched as they restarted my body using certain sound and light codes, little tones and different colors, very rapid flashing colors of light moving in through the body. And they did something with my body to make it open up so I could go back into it. And then I got pushed, literally, thrown back down the tunnel and smacked back into the body going, oh boy. But I still could hear them. And they told me, you need to remember this. You need to know that we'll always be here. We're always around with humans. They just don't know. As far as angelic presences, you can call them what you want, but they are real. They're a part of our own selves that exist in higher dimensional reality fields. We're much more than we realize here when we're in human form. The Grail quest is about finding more of what that self is. It's about setting yourself free to be who you are and express who and what you are while you are here. It's really funny, when I had my near-death experience, I remember feeling, I don't want to go back there. All of a sudden, when I was out of the body, I felt expanded. I remembered all sorts of things as far as different types of life experiences that I'd had before this one. There was a sense of massive love and safety and connection to the universe. It was just a really blissful, wonderful state. And that was just the beginning of going through the tunnel and seeing the first level of what's out there. It was a wonderful space to be. That space can be brought here. You don't have to die to get there. But it's very difficult to do here because something happens, and this is something you're not going to find any other church teaching right now, any other temple. The consciousness and the body are intimately connected. If the genetic code is functioning in a certain way, only certain parts of your higher consciousness can come through. Right now, people have to have near-death experiences to tap in to their higher levels of consciousness. That's why a lot of people have the near-death experience, boom, come back, and all of a sudden they are changed. They just decide all sorts of things are more important. They shift their lives around. They get spiritual because they start to remember that there's more than just here. The quest for the Holy Grail was really about finding the part of ourself that we lost when we came into physical embodiment. It's an ancient quest. It was much older than simply the Knights Templar and, King Arthur and all those guys in the medieval times. This was an ancient quest that went back through the Egyptian period, through the Sumerian period. Humans have always quested to bring that lost something of themselves back into their awareness while they're here. Now, the Grail quest, as it's emerging in our contemporary society, it's coming up right now through something that's called the New Age movement. The New Age movement is basically a demonstration of the advancement of the human genetic code. What is happening to our race right now is we are evolving before our own eyes. Our genetic code is beginning to operate differently at an accelerated rate that is allowing higher frequencies of consciousness to come into the body. In the New Age movement, there are all sorts of different things emerging. We have sciences built on light and sound. We have very strong arguments for reincarnation now because people are remembering who they were. We have new sciences coming through, and some of them are extremely sophisticated, even more so than the sciences that our physicists are dealing with right now. Something is happening in our culture, and we are witnessing it. But sometimes it's a case of being so you can't see the forest through the trees. You're right in the middle of it, so you can't see it. But if you stand back a little bit and really look at what is happening in our culture, there is a lot of diversification now, and there are certain movements that are taking ideas that are very different from anything that was here 100 years ago. And they're taking them and running with them, and they're building cultures on them. It's starting to come into the holistic health movement. It's starting to come into business practices, where there are people now that are trying to integrate spiritual reality, free spiritual reality, into business transactions. I mean, it's touching every area of life at this point. This is a good thing. It's showing us that our species' consciousness is expanding and evolving. But there's a lot of growing pains that go along with that expansion. Our species, in the time period that we're in the middle of the Grail quest. It's not something we'll get to later. We're right smack in the middle of it. It's going to be very, very important in times to come that we begin to get in touch with ourselves, the real deep self, that self that we never have time to really listen to because we're always too busy trying to make everybody else happy and figure out what else we have to do to pay the bills and all that. There's a part of us deep down inside that if you just went out and sat in nature and you pretended for a day that phones, bosses, mortgages, all those things didn't exist. Pretend you were in a little paradise where everything was free and all you had to do was be in the moment. That's the space where you can begin to touch your own Holy Grail inside. In the times to come, within the next 17 years, we're going to need to find that space. But we're going to have help. This is where making the link between the Holy Grail quest and the place called Sarasota, Florida comes in. Behind the ancient Grail quests, there is a whole history of knowledge. Knowledge that has been held in secret societies. I know because I was trained by one of them. It's called the Melchizedek Cloister. There were certain teachings that predated Egyptian texts, that predated Sumerian texts. There's some very ancient teachings that dealt with something called the planetary Templar complex. Now, when I use the word Templar in general audiences, most people think, well, the only time I've heard that is Knights Templar. You know, this has nothing to do with the Knights Templar other than the fact that their name came down using that word because that's what they were questing for control over. It wasn't theirs. And it's not a name that's affiliated with some of the very unspiritual things that they participated in their quest for power. But the word Templar does have to do with power. And it has to do with Sarasota, Florida. The word Templar comes from a very, very ancient time. When I talk about ancient, I'm not talking about must have been Egyptian or Sumerian because they were the first cultures here. This is what our history books will tell us. There is progressively more evidence surfacing about cultures that were older than that. And there will be more archaeological finds as we move along. We have a concept of what our history is in our culture, in our world culture, that gives us an understanding or a framework of how we define ourselves today. What happens if that supposed history of our evolution that we have been taught since we came into this place was the way it was? What if it wasn't that way? What if it was very different? It's a question we need to consider, because the truth is, it is very different than what we're being told. Now, pre-ancient cultures are something that our archaeologists and our scientists are looking into and trying to figure out. Right now we have a bunch of theories all over the place. Some theories say that human beings came out of pond scum. They were pond scum, then they became fish, then they walked up on land, and all of a sudden they just became Homo sapiens. It took many, many millions of years, but that's one theory. And of course, when you trace that back further, it all happened with a big boom. Big Bang. Which is only partly true, because there's some truth to the Big Bang. But there was a reason for the Big Bang, and somebody made it happen, which is the difference. It wasn't an accidental thing that happened because atoms and molecules and gases came together and crashed, and all of a sudden, boom, created life. There it was. No purpose, no meaning, no intention. It wasn't created, it just happened. If we trace our beliefs that are very common in our society, that we're taught in school, that are endorsed by the scientific community, we're taught that basically we came out of a bunch of gases that collided, somehow pond scum came out of that, and somehow, after we crawled up on land and started to develop lungs and things, we ended up as people with brains. And of course, once the body stops, so does the person. This is what we're taught in the scientific paradigm. Now we have the spiritual paradigm on the other side that says, no, 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 this is the creationist theory. God created us. They got that right. But then, of course, we go into versions of the Adam and Eve story and eating apples and getting kicked out of the garden and all sorts of really interesting fairy tales. And I'm not afraid to say that. I used to be. Oh my God, I don't want to, like, people get upset if I challenge this for them. Well, I've learned something. I've learned enough by studying the teachings of the Melchizedek cloister to actually get angry enough to stand up for what I know to be true. There are certain things we have not been told, that the churches did not tell us, back in the times of the Knights Templar, and before that, when the early Christian religions were forming out of what used to be the Jewish religions. There was information in small pockets and small secret societies that was floating around that if the governments of the time found you had, you'd get killed very quickly. This information came from something we're going to talk about in tomorrow's workshop mostly, but they're called the Cloister Doratura plates. They were a set of 12 silver holographic discs, physical, that had billions of years of history recorded. It is a technology that's more advanced than anything we have on planet today. Yet supposedly we're the most advanced civilization that's ever been on this planet? Don't think so. There are a lot of things that we need to remember about our history if we're going to get a handle on our own Grail quest. One of the most fascinating things is to realize that right now we're sitting in a place on the planet that once upon a time in ancient history, before the Sumerians, was considered the most holy, sacred place on the planet. There was a reason for that. That reason is because, here we go with the word Templar again. I will tell you what a Templar is. A Templar, that word, comes out of the word template. When we talk about templates in the Azurite Temple, we talk about scalar wave grids, or standing waveforms of light and sound that create the underlying structure upon which matter manifests. From that, you get your subtle energy body systems, your chakra systems, your kundalini energy currents that are in the human body. Well, planets have these bodies too. There is a subtle energy structure, and we have a lot of science to talk about that, but I'm not doing a science lecture tonight. But there is a good foundation of new science, which is ancient science, that tells us about the templates upon which matter manifests. The templates of the planet are the energy structures, the core energy structures that run energy and consciousness through this planetary body. The Templar complex, as it used to be known 200,000 years ago, was the very specific map of the energy systems on this planet, the interdimensional energy systems. It was a map of stargates that opened into other dimensional fields, not just other star systems, but other dimensional fields as well. The Templar is something that is very important to human evolution. If we begin to remember the mechanics and the secrets of this planet's energy system, we will begin to rebuild what was once here. Once upon a time, on this very site, in fact, several upon a times before Sumerian culture, there were massive civilizations here. There are some ruins that are being found around the Bimini Islands and things, and Jennifer Hutchie, our professional archaeologist person, knows a bit more, and she'll probably talk about those. But on this site, and the reason I can talk with conviction is because I remember, because I had lifetimes here, many of them. There were cultures, two primarily, that I want to talk about. One was called, in the legends, Atlantis. That wasn't really the name of it. It was the Atlantean root race that happened to live there. That's where it got the name Atlantis. This was the center of the main generator temples. The legends of Atlantis, some of them, as they've come down in the New Age movement, are true. Some of them. This was a place where always, whenever there were advanced cultures, this was the place where the main temples would be built, because the temples were energy generation plants. They could take energy from the planetary grids and amplify it in certain ways and create free energy systems that could control weather patterns. They could do all sorts of things. They could create advanced healing technologies because they knew how to run the energies of the planetary Templar complex. The site of Sarasota, Florida, has a very special gift. And after we talk a little bit, and let Jennifer talk a bit, about the ancient cultures that might have been here. Now, I'll probably fill in most of the details on what I remember about the ancient cultures, and she'll fill in the archaeological perspective on what's being found around here, and what is the evidence, what's happening in the archaeology movement. Because in the archaeology movement, there's something scary happening. It's called information repression. The forbidden archaeology. Oh my gosh, we found beings with big elongated heads. Let's pretend they did something to mutate themselves just in case they were aliens and we don't want to deal with it. I mean, there are things that are happening in the sciences that are really reprehensible as far as taking information that could be interpreted in 20 different ways, taking one that fits the paradigm they're endorsing and saying, this is the only possible explanation. Like the Darwinian theory that was real popular for a long time. We used to be apes and now we're not. That's losing popularity these days. Now they think we're fish. So Jennifer is going to talk about some of the archaeological aspects of this area. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about the real secrets of Sarasota, Florida. And I'm going to talk more about the Templar complex. Now, for people who are staying for the workshops, tomorrow we will get into the Templar complex quite a bit more. And there will be a book by the end of this 3-day period. There's going to be a book available that deals with some of the very more precise mechanics of what the Templar is, how it's structured, what the most important sites are. But right now, the main idea I think I'd like to leave you with before I turn the floor over to Jennifer is truth or fiction, ancient cultures. I will be presenting you with a view of history that will challenge probably everything that you've learned in this culture. There's lots of myths and legends that have come up through centuries, through primitive cultures, through Native American culture, through Mayan culture, through Egyptian culture, through sophisticated cultures. I mean, some of the Native American and the Egyptian cultures are quite sophisticated. But there has always been an awareness, more than what our science gives us, an awareness that this universe, this world, and each one of us are part of something greater than what's just outside before our eyes. The Native Americans knew about sacred sites, places where special things happened. The very ancients from 200,000 years ago knew about those sacred sites too, because they knew the science of the Templar complex. So one of the things that Azurite Temple is dedicated to teaching is the relationship between a human being and the planet that we're walking on. This is a return of the ancient teachings that once belonged to races that were very advanced that did walk this planet. Some of the most ancient ones, 200,000 years ago and before, won't be found. There's nothing left that you can find from them. 200,000 years ago, something called a red pulse hit this planet, which is kind of like a solar boom that comes through on the first dimensional frequencies, which hits the molecular structure, core molecular structure of biological forms and structures. It creates an effect of vaporization, kind of like you'd see on the Sci-Fi Channel. Boom, there a minute and gone the next. One of those. Some of them actually, some of what would have been remains that would have been left, disappeared that way. Now, in Atlantean period, and I talk about the Atlantean period, it's a long period actually, but when I mention Atlantis, I'm talking about the year 9558 BC, because that's when the final Atlantean island sunk. There was a continent before that. 28,000 BC is when that partially blew up, became islands. There's a whole history here that our archaeologists will eventually probably stumble into if they follow the traditional paradigm. But then there's some rebel archaeologists. They're saying, hey, wait a minute, there's evidence of different things that can be interpreted in different ways. Why are you just looking at it this way? And then there's that peer pressure thing that happens to archaeologists when they're still in the mood to really discover things. They really want to find out. Then they find out they're part of a paradigm of scientific repression, where if they say things that aren't going along with the common theories, they're going to be blacklisted and they're going to be treated like, ooh, you have a disease kind of thing. It could ruin your career if you decide that you might think Atlantis exists. You know? The archaeological perspective will eventually begin to verify some of the things that are taught in the New Age movement, some of the things that are taught by Azurite Temple. But for now, leaving you with the thought of the Templar and your possible relationship to the energy systems that run through this planet, that make this planet go, what might that have to do with you, and how can you begin to cultivate that relationship? Because that relationship between planet and person, between the planetary Templar complex and the inner eternal self, is part of the Grail quest. In the ancient times, and then even medieval times, the Grail quest was looking for the sacred sites that held the power, looking for the fountain of youth that if you bathed in it or drank from it, you would have immortality. All of these legends were about the Templar complex, learning the energy systems, because they knew they had enough records. The Knights Templar had records. They knew that at least Atlantean civilization existed, because they had some of the technologies. One of the things they had were one of 12 cloister Duratura plates, those holographic recording devices. So think about for a moment, while I change the floor over here to Jennifer. Go on in, Jen. Just think about what it might mean to rediscover a power and a relationship of love between this planet that we see as a solid thing, rather than a being, rather than a living life force. Think about what it might mean to recapture that relationship, where you could remember what once upon a time the ancients knew, which was how to bring energy from the planet into yourself to heal, to accelerate your spiritual development, to expand your consciousness, to grow. And in the ancient times, the culmination of learning to do these things ended up in one thing: the ability to pass through stargates biologically. What that has come down religiously as is ascension. They are the same thing. Ascension is stargate passage. When they talk about Christ and ascending and all of that stuff, they're talking about the ability to use the planetary Templar complex and to attune the body enough. It requires being spiritually integrated to go through a stargate, or you spontaneously combust. It's a frequency thing that has to do with the DNA. These are the potentials. Learning, relearning, remembering the things that used to be ours and our abilities. That's what the workshops are going to be about over the weekend. And when I come back, I'll talk a little bit more specifically about what we're sitting on here in Sarasota, Florida, and why no matter where in the world you live, this place is the most important place you need to know about. Because no matter where you are, you can use it. You can bring the energy home with you. So I'll turn the microphone over now to Jennifer Hutchie. She's a professional archaeologist, and I will let her explain a little bit more about, let them know who you are, Jen, and we love her. Yeah, here we go.
Thank you.
We at Asbury love her. Thanks.
Okay. Bear with me for a second. Hello. I hope you guys can bear with me. I've been doing archaeology for about 6 years, and I've dug a lot of sites and written a lot of reports, but I'm new to the public speaking, and I could definitely empathize with what Anna said. I think I almost dropped out of college when I had a public speaking class as well. But I wrote something that I'd like to read first, and then maybe if you guys have some questions about some of the particular sites, we could get into that. But hope you'll bear with me here. You might learn a little bit more about how archaeology works in the U.S. than you wanted to. However, I think it's important just to learn why we aren't hearing about these sites in the mainstream and why they're not accepted by science, and why you just hear from these renegade authors that write about the things going on with Atlantis and everything, but you're just not going to hear it from professional archaeologists. And I'd like to explain why, because it makes me angry too. I have to say, the more I've been studying about it, I agree 100% with all the points you brought up earlier. But anyway, I'm going to read you what I've written thus far. As Anna said, the topic of my talk is Hidden Archaeology, Forbidden Potentials and Mainstream Propaganda, Insights on Oversights in the Archaeological Paradigm. I would venture a bet that most, if not all, of the people here tonight are familiar with some of the more controversial archaeological theories put forth in the popular media. Evidence of extraterrestrial involvement in human evolution, artifacts and monuments showing technology of a complexity that we could not replicate until fairly recently, or not even at all. And this is coming up more and more. These artifacts are popping up which show that, it's strange. The older artifacts are more sophisticated and not more primitive. You would think that upon a linear evolution that it would have started out simple and, come to the point where we are now, but it kind of shows the opposite happened in some of these sites, that we were more complex, and then somehow knowledge was lost, and then it got built back up again. You're not going to really find that from professional archaeologists, however. We still wonder how the Great Pyramids were really constructed and how Mayans built megalithic structures using rocks weighing hundreds of tons, transported often from quarries hundreds of miles away, allegedly without the use of the wheel. The enigmatic Nazca lines in Peru, which can only be viewed in their entirety from the air. And as I was saying, technologically advanced artifacts have been discovered in strata layers, basically geological layers of dirt, that have been dated to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years in age at dozens of locations around the globe. These keep popping up, and scientists just don't know what to do with them. So many things can't be explained by the widely held but conservative theories of modern archaeology. Of course, man would like to think he has reached the pinnacle of his evolution, that we're at the top of our form, if you will, regarding technology in our domain over this planet and its other inhabitants. But for all our technology and all the advancements made over the past several thousand years, so much of our past does remain a mystery. Over the past 30 years, many of these controversial archaeological artifacts, sites, and theories have been tackled in books such as Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock, Forbidden Archaeology by Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson, and of course the classic Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Daniken. Hundreds of items of great antiquity and or astounding technological or cultural development have been investigated by these authors, and there certainly is no lack of public interest in their claims. Why, however, aren't some of these avenues followed up on by traditional archaeologists? True, the field of archaeology is still in its infancy when compared with more traditional sciences, but in this day and age we have computers, satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, several types of sophisticated dating methods, and high technology at our disposal. With this in mind, how can it be so easy to systematically ignore such claims across the board without even the benefit of further investigation? At the very least, why aren't some of the more intriguing discoveries being looked into that could provide insight into man's true evolution in history? First, it would be helpful to explain how archaeology is undertaken today in the United States. There are two main types of archaeologists working in this country. They fit into the category of either academia, that is, those employed at colleges or universities, or cultural resource management, also known as contract or compliance archaeology, where I've done most of my work. Academia is the strongest proponent of the almighty status quo. Traditionally, graduate students have been directed to write papers on topics endorsed by their professors. I've known of instances where students are also strong-armed into even writing about something that their professors are in particular interested in, or just to follow up on research that's already been begun by another student. I don't know of anyone personally who has gotten away with researching alternative theories proposed by Van Daniken or any of these other authors, unless it has been purely from a cultural anthropological standpoint, i.e. the study of cult archaeology, or these beliefs from a sociological perspective, basically to poke fun at it. Especially in grad school, the thesis is of utmost importance in obtaining jobs after graduation or in gaining admittance to a PhD program. Of course, schools will look for people with similar research interests to their own. Sadly, many graduate-level archaeology students are often deficient in actual field experience or digging. I've known of many MA and PhD archaeologists who can spout all the theory of the past 100 years, but who have never even put a shovel to dirt. This is analogous to an auto mechanic having read tons of Chilton manuals but never have actually worked on a car, and then having that same individual teach scores of other student auto mechanics how it should be done. What is of real importance in the world of academia, however, is not actual experience, but what has been written and published. If someone has somehow gotten the go-ahead to research ideas not embraced by the majority employed in the profession, they aren't going to end up on the short list of prime candidates for their next job. Academic jobs are few and far between and generally aren't obtained by radicals who rock the boat. Once individuals do find a job in academia, most of them aren't even going to be able to go out digging. Instead, they'll find themselves in a teaching position. Most schools that do any field work at all are involved in their own field school projects for students or work in contract archaeology as a sideline business. A proportionately minuscule number of the bigger schools can afford to fund pure research projects, such as the University of Pennsylvania doing work in Latin America. But this kind of effort is few and far between. There isn't much money floating around for excavation anywhere, and surely someone isn't going to be approved by the other faculty and department chair for what would be viewed as a waste of money on flights of fancy. Academia is not going to be the area of archaeology where any effort is initiated investigating evidence of ancient astronauts, Atlantis, or anything else they regard as pseudoscience. The second main area of archaeology in the U.S. is cultural resource management, or CRM. The majority of archaeologists in this country are employed in CRM, over 100,000 individuals according to published statistics of the United Field Technicians Union. In a few words, I would describe CRM as contract archaeology or compliance archaeology. The U.S. has a number of state and federal laws which require environmental and cultural investigation of areas that may be impacted by construction. Certain types of development or construction activities mandate state or federal permitting, licensing, and or funding before they can receive the go-ahead to begin work on their site. I'll give you some examples. The Highway Department wishes to widen an existing road so they can put in a turning lane. The city of Sarasota may plan to put in a new beach on its park property bordering the bay. A gas line may be proposed by a large oil company to connect two of its existing lines. Or perhaps a franchise owner wants to put up another McDonald's or Walmart in your neighborhood, just what we need. Any of these situations would require archaeological investigation before a single tree was cut down or the first bucketful of dirt excavated by a backhoe. These contract archaeologists are subcontracted to do work by the client, who is the Department of Transportation, the City of Sarasota, McDonald's franchise owner, or whoever is planning to build on the property. The work they do is limited to only the area in which the construction is to occur. It doesn't matter if the potentially most important archaeological discovery of our history lies just outside the project area. In contract archaeology, you can only excavate where you are told to. And you can't blame the client. They want to finish their construction project with the minimum of cost without having to pay archaeologists who are holding up their project. As little archaeology is done as possible in all these projects, the bare minimum required to satisfy the law. This is the rule and not the exception in CRM. You're authorized to dig only where something is going to be built. It's a crapshoot. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to find something, but in all likelihood you're not going to find anything. And clients prefer that we don't. This is a subcontracting business, and the bottom line is money. Sadly, I've seen cases where paperwork or reports were fudged and excavation wasn't finished so the contract archaeology company could finish on time and under budget. Some stories are floating around of unethical contract archaeology companies who find nothing on purpose just to make more money from the client. As Joe Pachinko writes in his expose on contract archaeology, contract archaeologists are paid not to find anything. It's sad but true. In CRM, if you happen to stumble upon an interesting site in excavating for the new highway interchange or Walmart, you can consider yourself lucky. Are we going to find concrete evidence of Atlantis or extraterrestrial involvement in our history in this scenario? I don't think so. I've explained the two major types of archaeology being practiced in the U.S. and how their inherent structure makes the difficulty of fielding unorthodox research difficult, if not impossible. Now what I'd like to show you is how archaeologists are biased to shy away from pursuing these unconventional ideas right from their formative years as students in college. The number of major universities offering courses in fantastic archaeology, cult archaeology, pseudo-archaeology, and fringe archaeology is on the rise. Some of these reputable schools include Harvard, University of South Florida, University of Iowa, University of South Dakota, and the University of Michigan. I recently found a website on the internet for the students of one of these such classes. This is what the intro page of the website says. Welcome to the world of the strange, absurd, and downright wacky. Fantastic archaeology, lost tribes, sunken continents, and ancient astronauts. This site features an animated debunking flying saucer and has a good time poking fun at people who believe in what it views as radical ideas. And continues, when in doubt, bring in the extraterrestrials. They'll help you build everything from batteries to pyramids or crop circles. Along the way, they'll mutilate a cow or two, and if you're really lucky, you'll be abducted. If you have the right stuff, they may fiddle with your genetic material and develop a new subspecies of humans. Beware if space aliens could steal your brain. Students are learning here to automatically disregard any such controversial subjects as anything to be seriously studied. Other topics covered in such classes on fantastic archaeology include Bigfoot, the Bermuda Triangle, the Loch Ness Monster, Noah's Ark, the Ark of the Covenant, tabloid archaeology, PowerPoints, sacred sites and New Agers, New Age Indians, Atlantis, and the Shroud of Turin. From reading some of the content on these pages, it's obvious to see that mainstream archaeology regards any of these topics as not only being unworthy of serious interest, but also to be treated as pure objects of derision. With this polar opposite of a supportive and open-minded environment of your professors and peers, would you feel comfortable fielding research on any of these ideas if you were an archaeologist? But what happens when someone does decide to go out on a limb and advocate a radical idea in archaeology? What if this has nothing to do with aliens or Atlantis or the Ark of the Covenant? What if it's simply a particular archaeological site excavated in the traditional manner that shows a greater antiquity for mankind than is generally believed? In the book Forbidden Archaeology, authors Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson discuss the case of Virginia Steen McIntyre. Steen McIntyre was part of a U.S. Geological Survey team working under a grant from the National Science Foundation on a site in Mexico in the 1960s. So obviously these were government employees, not quite the radicals here. In the excavation of the site, a number of fairly complex artifacts were recovered from geologic strata, which was dated to approximately 250,000 years ago. Now you must understand, according to mainstream archaeology, what we would consider to be anatomically modern humans weren't even around until about 100,000 years ago, and certainly not in the New World. This state of great antiquity was supported by several different types of dating methodologies, including uranium and fission track dating. The data produced by Virginia Steen McIntyre and these other geologists and archaeologists would have pushed the clock of human evolution back 150,000 years or more than what's generally accepted. This potentially could have been one of the most important sites ever found. Was further work done to investigate the validity of Steen McIntyre's work? No. In fact, she had great difficulty even being able to obtain permission to publish her report. What happened to Virginia Steen McIntyre? This site was so controversial that both her work and her character were ridiculed to the point where she became a near recluse. In fact, she never found work in her field again. What's the message here? Don't rock the boat. If you do, you risk doing so at the peril of sabotaging your career. I'd like to say that Virginia Steen McIntyre is the only person who has had their career ruined by advocating a controversial idea, but sadly this isn't so. In Forbidden Archaeology, Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson refer to the occurrence of knowledge filtration. They believe the scientific community screens out data that does not fit into the established paradigms of how things are supposed to be. They list case after case after case of amazing scientific discoveries over the past 100 years that have never seen the light of day, or if they did, were routinely subjected to ridicule before being summarily dismissed from consideration. Their work is a mammoth volume of over 900 pages listing dozens and dozens of these examples. Anatomically modern human skeletons and accompanying artifacts of human manufacture found in California mines during the gold rush in strata dated to 10 to 50 million years ago. A gold chain in Illinois found within a solid piece of coal dating to 300 million years ago. An iron pot found in a block of coal in Oklahoma dating to 312 million years ago. Hundreds of bizarre grooved metallic spheres found in a South Africa strata dating to between 2 and 8 billion years ago. You would think that some of these findings would make people sit up and take notice. You would have thought that some of these potentially amazing finds would have made their way into archaeological journals, even if they were later disproven. Even to just include such a prospect, the possibility of changing the ideas we have about our age and origin as a species. But they have not. I'm an archaeologist, and I've never even heard of most of these examples, not during my years in college, not during interaction with colleagues, nor in any professional reports or journals. If something is just too wild for us to consider as being possible, it's not going to be taken seriously at all. Whether or not it happens to be true isn't even a factor. I've explained the nature of the discipline of archaeology in the U.S. Most archaeologists either fit into the category of academia, where jobs are few and far between, very little actual fieldwork is done, and the paradigms are painfully slow to change. Radicals need not apply here, at least if you ever want to be published or have a job in the field. The other category of archaeology, cultural resource management, employs the vast majority of archaeologists in this country. However, these individuals are limited to fieldwork only in the area in which imminent construction activity is planned. The structure of the field does not allow for outside research of alternative theories. Furthermore, the discipline of archaeology not only precludes support for such ideas, but goes out of its way from the undergraduate level up to instill a bias in fledgling archaeologists with classes such as fantastic archaeology, teaching future archaeologists that not only are these ideas not worthy of study, but are something they should feel embarrassed to embrace and should instead feel comfortable making fun of. Why haven't we found more evidence supporting claims purported by authors such as Van Daniken, Cremo, and Thompson? It's pretty clear. Professional archaeologists are just not looking for the answers to solving the riddles of Atlantis or extraterrestrial involvement or any of these unorthodox ideas. Even if they were interested, they would not pursue this for fear of professional ridicule and sabotaging their own career. Therefore, I propose that we keep an open mind to researchers such as Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson, who may not be classified as professional archaeologists, but have enough guts to follow through on research into what mainstream archaeology is afraid to investigate. Professional archaeologists have dropped the ball, if you will. Perhaps it will be these outside researchers who have nothing to lose that can provide us with answers to the most important questions of our existence on this planet. Anyway, that's what I wrote.
Very good. Thank you.
Interesting points about the inside of the establishment of archaeology. Archaeology becomes a significant issue when we're dealing with the ideas of the mainstream. Now, the mainstream is the basic propaganda program that you're going to find when you turn on the TV, when you read the newspapers, when you go to apply for a job, when you go to a school, when you put your child in school. There is an establishment. That establishment is built on established ideas about the way reality is and about the way things are. The establishment, in terms of archaeology and in terms of other sciences, has certain parameters that it will allow information to be explored. And beyond those parameters is a forbidden territory where anybody who dares to even challenge or go beyond and look to see what else might be there becomes blacklisted and pressured, peer pressured, and the biggest pressure is you spent 4 or 6 or 8 years getting your archaeology degree or your doctorate degree or whatever degree and profession you've spent all your time and money doing, and you find that the only way you can use it is if you endorse the establishment, because if you do not, the establishment will not endorse you. So all of a sudden you find yourself out of grad school and you find yourself with very large student loans to pay off, so you really, really need to start using that education. Are you going to be radical then? Probably not. Maybe in 10 years you'll be able to crawl out from under it. Maybe not. This is a problem that is happening in our global culture. It's called information repression. It is a way of controlling masses of people by presenting things in a very certain framework and telling them that is the only way it is, and if you don't believe that, there's something wrong with you. This has been used throughout our history. It's being used today. When it comes to archaeology, this becomes important in certain ways, not because it really matters a whole bunch what Indian tribe made what shaped arrowheads at what period. The real importance of archaeology and the real quest behind archaeology is who are human beings, where did they come from, when did they come from where. This is what archaeology really at its core is trying to find. Yet at the same time the establishment refuses to allow exploration into some of the ideas Jennifer talked about that are presented through other books and other people who aren't archaeologists but who are looking into forbidden archaeology. If the establishment was trying to honestly answer and honor the concept of what archaeology is supposed to be, finding the answers to our origins, they would allow that type of exploration. Just leaves a question in my mind, what's wrong with this picture? You say you want to find stuff, old stuff, not because you like to collect old stuff, but because you want to find the secrets of where humans came from. But obviously you already have an idea of knowing exactly where humans came from because you don't want to hear about the other 500 different things that could go with these little pieces of things that you found. It creates a back movement or a backlash movement. That's where the forbidden archaeology movement is coming from. If you want to find information on the possibilities of some of the New Age ideas that talk about ancient cultures being true, don't go to the mainstream archaeological sites on the website. Don't bother looking in those books, because you will not find it. In fact, you'll find it picked on, laughed at, and the people who explore it made fun of. If you want to find it, go into the forbidden, go into the silly websites that other people consider silly, and realize There may be a lot more data there than anything you're getting out of the establishment. Check into the archaeological finds that are being made. Archaeology isn't the focus of my existence or the focus of my world, but it has a purpose. The purpose of archaeology really, and I think the only purpose it has for me in my life, is as we discover more things about our past, there are certain ideas, knowings, teachings, and realities that are part of certain people's lives today. Some people remember being part of Atlantis. They have reincarnational memory. Some people just know there was something before what the history books are telling us. When archaeological finds are made that support these facts, it helps people to have the spirit and the courage to realize there's not something wrong with them in being different, in knowing those things or having a feeling that there was something before. It helps them to move forward. It helps our consciousness to expand. So archaeology is important in one aspect. It will help us to prove to ourselves that our crazy quests of the Holy Grail, of finding that truth within us, truths of the ancients, truths that still are part of our existence somewhere, archaeology can help us confirm that. There are going to be things found, and I know this. I don't know when they're going to be found, but there are still records left from ancient civilizations that predate Sumerian culture. And I'm not talking about civilizations that ran around with rocks and sharpened tools, with, flint and that kind of thing. I'm talking about cultures that were so sophisticated that they knew how to run energy in a way that they could levitate objects. They knew how to do surgery on human bodies without breaking the skin. They didn't worry about blood transfusions. They didn't have to. There were cultures. The one I'd like to talk a little about isn't Atlantis. Not yet. This one was a place called Brenoe. The word Brenoe comes from a very ancient language called the Anahazi language. The Anahazi language is one of the first auditory languages spoken. Now, I would say, as I usually do in workshops where I cover things and have intense diagrams and all sorts of things to show you, which I'm not going to do in a shorter lecture, I would say that statement applies to our time matrix, not just to our planet. A time matrix is a 15-dimensional reality system, and that's what we're walking around in, and that's what the planet exists in. This is part of the teachings that we get into in the Asarite Temple, but usually only in the mid to master's level. We don't usually hit people just coming in with those kind of things. But I wanted to introduce it tonight for the people who did just come in. We teach a system of multidimensional reality, the science of multidimensional reality, and its spiritual applications. I think that I'm trying to think of where I want to go with this. I know where I was going to go with this. Have redefining the past, understanding the present, and creating the future. I'm going to take that concept, redefining the past, first of all. If we're going to begin to understand who we are today, it will be helpful to understand who we were before, where our cultures came from. You don't need an extensive, exhaustive exploration of history, because you're not going to find it in the books. But if we can embrace a concept, or even the possibility, that before known cultures, like Sumeria, there were advanced cultures, like Atlantis, Lemuria, and many, many others before them. And there are various reasons why things have not been found yet, but will be. If we can embrace that our race is much, much older than we're taught, if we can embrace the possibility that in these pre-ancient advanced cultures there is much more known about the workings of the planet, the physics of how the planet operates, if we can think about the fact that part of the planetary Templar complex, the intrinsic natural physics of the planet, there are certain things called stargates. they don't exactly work like they do on the movie or the TV series Sliders. They don't just kind of like pop up as this liquid light thing that you dive through. It doesn't exactly work that way. Not exactly. The reason our culture doesn't have a working knowledge, in a serious vein, of things like stargates is because we haven't had any opened in 200,000 years. After a while, a species forgets. That's part of what happened here. The big part of what happened here is part of what's still happening here, and it's called information repression. Right now, it may surprise a lot of people to find that there's one thing called science or physics being taught in schools and being practiced in the outer echelons of the professions of science. And there's another thing the governments are doing. There's something called scalar science. That is only a mild theory played with in some of the physicist camps as far as professionals go. Scalar science is the science of subtle waveforms. It's the science of understanding the intrinsic ultra-microparticle realities behind particle manifestation. Scalar science is not science fiction. There are aspects of world governments that, as we speak, have already developed major technologies using scalar science. Yet at the same time, scalar science is not recognized as anything valid within the establishment. You won't learn it going to regular school unless you happen to get into a secret society and pass all their initiations. Then you get selected. There's a selection process that goes on in education in our world governments, but particularly in America. There's a system that happens. Children are brought from the womb and put in preschool. There they get socialization. Then they're put in kindergarten. There the indoctrination begins. And from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, you get indoctrinated into a set of ideas that tells you this is how reality works. Anything different than that is either you need to go see a psychologist because there's something wrong with your mind that you would think that, or you just get ostracized in general. We are conditioned from the time we come in here to believe a certain paradigm and nothing else. When a person does well with being a sheep in our society, they're good little students, they get good grades, they show intelligence. The dangerous thing, intelligence. That means they can think for themselves. That means they have the ability to take a bunch of facts, put them together, and say, does this really pan out? These are the ones that certain control groups, let's say, in our world establishment, keep their eye on. The bright students. Because first of all, they'd be the most dangerous if they were let loose, because they might find some of the things that are trying to be hidden here. Second of all, they're wonderful resources. These are the people that when they enter college, then certain sororities will come up to them. Sororities. They will come up to them and say, we pledge for you to be part of our group. And certain ones, I think Skull and Bones is one of them. Yeah, that trains little politicians.
That's right.
Metaphysically. All right, so there are these secret societies that are actually a part of our educational systems that are done off the books. They're not something that you can track or that you're going to find too much of on 2020 TV show or anything like that, because they are large organizations that have roots that go back hundreds of years that have selected certain humans to give them certain knowledge. And they would give them certain knowledge so they could use that human as a resource in furthering certain agendas that aren't part of the public domain either. What we're facing in our culture right now is a situation where we have a New Age movement that's built upon light, love, spirituality, and all sorts of wonderful ideals. And there's an aspect of this that's also frightening. It's called cluelessness. And it's not something meant in a derogatory way to the people who are part of the New Age movement. It's part of propaganda. There's propaganda being run through the New Age movement that is steering the New Age movement in a very specific way to very specific ideas and no others. There's another movement that some people in the New Age movement don't realize is part of the New Age movement. It's called the UFO movement. There's a bunch of wild and wacky things happen in that movement. And there are some really messed up people in that movement. I mean, you do get, you know how you look and say, oh, normal people say, oh, you get really weirdos in that movement. Well, you know, you kind of do sometimes. But you can have weirdos anywhere. They just express themselves more openly in the UFO movement. It's a good forum for them to talk. But there are also some wonderful, intelligent, sincere people who realize something is going on. You have the New Age movement people over here saying, I'm having angelic contact. You have the UFO people here saying, I'm seeing spaceships and being abducted. And the UFO people are saying, you're just an airhead, you believe in angels. And then the angel people are saying, well, you're just a wacko, you believe in ETs. You know, there's this really bizarre dynamic of conquer through division happening between the UFO movement, the New Age movement, and regular mainstream society, which is taught to look at both movements as total wackos. All right? Anybody that's had military training usually has some idea, because somewhere in their education, the idea of conquer through division is brought across to them as a very good strategy of how to defeat the enemy. If you have groups, and I'm not saying the government, there's nothing wrong with the government. It's not this government or the government over there that's the problem. It's certain factions that exist within that structure that are trying to take control of things. And they're running propaganda programs. Propaganda to make sure the angel people don't like the ET people, the ET people don't like the angel people, the mainstream people don't like either of those people, and then the religious spiritual people from the traditions think they're all from the devil. You know, it's sad what's happening. Because these are things, people who believe in UFOs, people who believe in angels, people who just believe in God like it says in the Bible, and mainstream people who don't want to believe in any of it because it's too confusing. The ideas that these people hold are very important to them. People who believe in angels, that's one of the most glorious types of experiences you can have. Then you have other people condemning you for it. People who believe in UFOs feel the same way about it. Mainstream people, they tend to get a little arrogant about the whole thing because they're so used to reality being like you see it on TV, and of course any of that stuff is just Sci-Fi Channel, so it's not real. There's a little bit of arrogance that runs through the mainstream where they think they got it. Well, everybody knows that stuff doesn't exist. You know, everybody knows that if you're having a bad day, it has nothing to do with holistic healing. You just go put yourself on Prozac or something. You know, they're being fed one set of propaganda. The masses. Then there's the little groups within the masses who meet in places like this, who want to explore something else. What might this be about? They want to learn more. If we can understand that ideas can either bring us together as a peoples, ideas can bring us together in ourselves and allow the different parts of ourselves to unify, or they can separate. They can separate you from your own inner holy grail. They can separate you from your neighbor and your neighbor from you. They can separate countries. Ideas are very important. What we choose to put our belief in. Our belief is our power. We're assigning our power, our personal power and resources, to endorsing an idea. The ideas that Azurite Temple stands for are very, very liberal. They're about bringing people together. They're also about identifying what is taking place that is separating people, turning them against each other. One of the things is our interpretation of history. If we believe that there's this really interesting gray zone, by the way, happening as far as scientific endorsement of paradigms. Where did humans come from? It used to be, well, Darwin was right, that's it. They just came from apes, period. We're grown-up apes. That's it. We are the top of the food chain on the planet, and, you know, came out of pond scum, you know, pat us on the head, aren't we great? Now there's challenge to that. Now there's other groups saying, well, there's similarities between the fetal development process that takes us back into their similarities to reptilian strains and fish strains, so I think it's more like we came out of, like, pond scum and then, like, you know, had flippers and were fish and then we came up on land. There's this group going. There's several other theories floating around. Right now, in the hardcore science community that knows everything, that's where everybody turns. They're the experts. They don't even know. They're arguing amongst themselves. Yet mainstream people are usually they're still caught on the end of the Darwinian wind. Because if you ask most people who never think about this stuff, where do you think humans came from? Apes. You know? And it's usually said with a question like, I don't know, never thought about it. You know what I mean? We're in a gray zone right now where the set established ideas are actually being a little bit challenged right within themselves, which is a good thing. Then you have this whole other movement emerging through the New Age movement and the UFO movement, the one point of union between these two movements. Both of them are saying something took place here long ago in ancient times before our recorded history that had to do with visitors from other places coming in and influencing the development of culture. The UFO people, a lot of them believe that. So do the New Age people. New Age people are very interesting, and the reason I even use such a category or a label, which I really don't like to label people in groups like that, New Age people have one thing that's a little different than mainstream people. In technical terms, it's called DNA activation level. In easier terms, it's called an expansion of consciousness that's happening as a result of the natural evolution of the human genome. People in the New Age movement have different ideas than the mainstream for a reason. Usually what draws people into the New Age movement are experiences or feelings or dreams or intuitions that make them feel a little out of place with mainstream interpretations. The New Age movement, what originally started as, was an evolution of consciousness. In the New Age movement, many people are beginning to endorse the concept of reincarnation. Now there's millions and millions of Hindus that have done that forever. But in America, where it's predominantly Christian or Jewish, that's just a no-no. You don't believe in reincarnation. The Bible, is against that, so you're not allowed to believe in that. It's kind of like, well, if it did happen to happen, and the Bible said it didn't, but it does anyway, wouldn't it be better to know? In the New Age movement, there are many people who are beginning to have memories of being themselves, but in other bodies and other times. They're beginning to remember seeing temple cities. They're beginning to remember walking among those temple cities and doing energy work with their hands and knowing how to run energy through their bodies so they could heal. Some people are remembering walking the ley lines, which are some of the smaller energy grids that run through the planetary Templar. There's memory coming back to people because of the DNA. There's something behind the DNA that we call the DNA template. That is the pattern of scalar waves, or intricate, geometrically arranged light and sound grids that begin what's called the accretion process, or drawing in of subatomic particles to form and build up matter. The DNA template is what's behind the manifest DNA that science has been able to detect. The DNA controls the amount of consciousness that can be embodied within a physical form. So as certain people's consciousness is expanding, it's going into psychic perception, going into angelic contact, going into channeling, holistic healing modalities where you're running energy and all these things. These are expansions of consciousness compared to the mainstream norm, and they're happening for a reason, because the DNA in those people is beginning to activate a bit more than it had been before. This is going to be happening to everybody eventually. And there are reasons for that we get into in some of the more intensive workshops, where we talk about the significance of the period of time between the year 2000 and the year 2017. There's something happening on this planet in this time period that has everything in the world to do with Sarasota, Florida. Sarasota, Florida is like an ancient hidden secret. If you have a planet, and that planet has an energy system, that once you know how to work that energy system, you can direct that energy to do amazing healing. You can direct that energy to create global free energy. Forget the light company and the gas company. If the planetary Templar complex on any planet is working, And there are people who have expanded enough consciousness to know how to run it in harmony with the natural laws of what we call universal unified field physics. If they can run it, it opens up a whole world of power. Now, if you have a planet like that, who has a Templar complex, but it's been sleeping, it's only been running on, let's say, a three-dimensional current for 200,000 years. And you have species that come and go during that 200,000-year period. And some of them left records, and some of them didn't. And some of them left records, and others stole them. So there's not too much left to remind anybody about the fact that this planet has a Templar complex. A Templar complex holds the key not just to free energy systems and the potentialities of Stargate travel. There's some of the things it does hold the potentials for. But why it's important to every person who cares about their own spiritual evolution and their own biological evolution is because the energies that run through the planetary Templar complex directly affect the DNA template in all of the life forms on the planet. If a person happens to live on a planet where the Templar complex begins to wake up to be able to carry multidimensional frequency, not just the frequencies of energies from dimensions 1, 2, and 3 that we're in, our three-dimensional system. Those energies become available and begin to run through the human form. It affects the DNA template. The reason people are beginning to have expanded consciousness is because their DNA templates are beginning to activate. And their DNA templates are beginning to activate because for the first time in 210,216 years, the planetary Templar complex is waking up. And this is a glorious thing for this race. It also has some problems associated with it that we get into in the workshops. What it means is if you know how to simply use your mind to direct energy through your body, you can make a connection to the energies of the planet that are accelerating now. And you can bring the energy into yourself to amplify your ability to hold more conscious awareness. If you want to know things, and you want to find that holy grail within yourself, your connection to Source, to God, to whatever you want to call the things that got us here in the first place, we are being presented now with an opportunity for conscious evolution, which means being consciously aware of how our consciousness and our biology is evolving. This is not something new, believe it or not. It sounds new in relation to what we've been taught is real. 200,000 years ago, it was common knowledge. By the time a child was 5 years old, 200,000 years ago, they knew about the Templar. They knew the rudimentary aspects of using its energy to help promote their own learning and their own development. They knew how to use its energy for healing. So they didn't get sick very often. They also knew that there was one place. Now, the planetary Templar is a very complex, geometrically, mathematically arranged grid of energy. There are certain points on the planetary grids that are more important than others in relation to how the energies in the Templar run. In the New Age movement, the concept of sacred sites has become very popular. And a lot of those sacred sites, like where the pyramids in Egypt are built and those kind of things, the ancients knew. That's why they built the pyramids and things there. They were sacred. But why were these sites sacred? What was it about these sites that made them any different from, 3 miles away or 40 miles away? In the ancient times, they knew some of how the Templar was structured. They knew that certain sites represented consolidated points of energy through which the energies of the Templar could be run and amplified more than they could in other areas. Giza, Egypt is one example. And it's kind of funny because there's this sleight of hand thing happening in the New Age movement where there are some groups who have hidden knowledge of the Templar. I've been fortunate because I was trained by one of those groups since the time I was 7. I've mentioned them before, the Melchizedek Cloister. They also call themselves the Priests of Ur, and they are in physical bodies, and they are associated with the island of Kauai, Hawaii. They make contact with certain individuals, and it's because of the individual's history of incarnation. The priests of our contact people they knew before. They're bringing information back through people like me and through others. There's also some others, secret societies, that are as ancient as the priests of Ur and the Melchizedek cloister, who have quite a bit of sacred knowledge on the Templar and how it works, that are aware that it's starting to activate now. But some of these other groups do not want human beings on the mass level to know. They want to be able to use the Templar to control masses of human beings. So there are good teachings about the Templar out there, and there are negative teachings about the Templar out there. We are teaching the Templar mechanics in the Azurite Temple as they were taught 200,000 years ago. They're taught under what's called the Law of One, which is unity consciousness, which means we're all aspects of God, we're all part of God. And this is God's knowledge entrusted to us, and we are to use it to benefit all evolution, and not against each other or to harm any evolution. The mechanics of the Templar are fascinating and complex, but there are some basic, very interesting things that even a layman can begin to understand and use. There are certain sites on the planet that are more powerful than others. In the mechanics, the scalar grid mechanics, scalar wave science, that's what it's built on, there are 3 primary points on the planetary grids that hold the most power over the Templar because they are the programming sites for the Templar complex. The Templar complex, to understand really what it is what we call a manifestation template. It is a field, a scalar field, a bunch of minute, where you can't see them with a microscope, scalar wave patterns, which are standing waves. They're not waves that go like this and move from one point to the other. They're waveforms that stand, like columnar waves. And there are whole grids of these. This is what everything in manifestation is created on. In relation to the Templar, the planetary grids, that's a word that's used a lot in the New Age movement, grids. What are these grids? They're energy grids. Yeah. Keep going. That was always my question. Like my mind is still trying to catch up with this. Okay, I get grids, energy grids. Can we connect this a little more to something? Yeah. Fortunately, I was very happy when I started getting my Templar mechanics training from people who can take it beyond the word grids to where the mind can follow a little more. The grids are scalar fields. It's a specific scalar field that is the manifestation template upon which this planet's molecular structure manifests. Now, if you understand the way the scalar grids or manifestation template of a form, be it a person or a planet, if you understand the specific mathematical relationships of how it was formed, you will find there are certain core structures, and then there are a whole series of outer structures. And it's the core structures that control the manifestation of everything that comes up all the way up to the particle level. With the planetary grids, you can picture these grids as a big, what we call a shield of light. Picture it as like a big disk that runs, it's actually a sphere, that runs through the planet. And it's composed of billions and billions and billions of points of light. It's actually light and sound. Scalar waves are standing waves that flash on and off. They go from being light when they oscillate, and then they stop oscillation and turn off and become sound. And it's a continual process of on and off. It goes so fast that the human eye doesn't pick it up. Neither do the scientific instruments yet. So picture this huge template that's inside the planet. Not if you can't dig and find it. You'd have to go through to the subatomic particle level, into the microparticle level, and beyond that, to units, the building blocks of matter that science has not yet found. They're called particle, particle, and particum. This is ultra-microparticle mechanics. It is antimatter, not antimatter, but antimatter mechanics. Antimatter is called thermoplasmic radiation. That is the template that all manifest things are built upon. The planetary Templar complex is built upon its main, its core, its brain, is an antimatter template. A thermoplasmic template, thermo, heat, radiation. It's a heat radiation template. Thermoplasm, by the way, is something our scientists haven't discovered yet, but the priests have known about for billions of years in their family lines. It is a substance that would be gaseous silica heat. Now, that's something the scientists can play with for a while. But as far as people wanting to know what the planetary Templar complex is and what they can do about that, if you can just picture that there's this template of gaseous hot gas that's actually composed of little billions of minute points of flashing on and off radiation points, light points. That gives you an idea of what's called the planetary shield, the manifestation template. Now, from the planetary shield, you get progressive layers of building up of energy networks. And eventually, you get building up of particle networks, and particles and antiparticles, and you get your subatomic structure that progressively builds up to the molecular level. And that's where the planetary body fills out. So if you can hold in mind the concept of a planetary shield as this grid of thermoplasmic radiation, or just a grid of light and sound, if you want to make it real simple. In that grid, when you go from its core, now it had to start someplace. It didn't just poof, there the whole thing is. There are certain core structures that template itself forms on. This is where we get into Cathara healing and the Cathara grid, because the core template of a scalar grid is called the Cathara grid. It's the core mathematical program that grid formed on. From the Cathara level, which is basically 12 points of light radiation that begin to interact with each other, that begin to manifest the template. From that, you begin to have broader and broader levels of energy interaction that create the manifestation template, the whole of it, not just its core, but everything that builds on the core. When I say the word planetary Templar complex, I'm not just referring to the core grid. I'm referring to all of the levels of that core template that the particles manifest on. When I say the word planetary shield, I am referring to that whole template that runs the energies through this planet. Now, in the planetary shield, there are 3 spots, 3 areas of frequency that control and govern the electromagnetic pulses that run the rest of the grids. Those 3 areas are always in the same spot, no matter what continents shift around and over them on the surface. Now, the place we call Sarasota, Florida, is very important because of this. The place that is known as the Bermuda Triangle area is very important because of this. And the place, way down there, called the South Pole, is very important because of this. The 3 primary control points for all of the energy systems, energy systems that literally create the electromagnetic force on this planet, are run and governed through these 3 primary points. These points are called signet points. 3 signet points, 1 planetary shield, 3 signet points. Out of those 3, the center one controls the other 2, and therefore all the rest of the whole template. Now, what emerges from the template, the scalar shield? You have your core Cathara grid of your 12 points. You have your larger manifestation template that begins having more and more and more points to fill out the Templar shield. This shield begins to manifest, just in the human body, ends up the same thing. Core template begins to manifest as the energy systems. You have the chakra system in the human body, the auric field in the human body. Well, the planet has these 2. Part of the Templar complex are vortices, which are spiraling circulations of energy that bring energy in from the unified field of energy that reality exists within, bring it into the template to keep energy circulating through it. They actually bring energy in and simultaneously send energy out. There's this constant inflow and outflow of energy that takes place between the reality field within which a person or planet is in and the body form that the person or planet is in. On the planetary grids, there are literally billions of what are called vortice sites. These are the spiraling energy sites. And sometimes people that are sensitive psychically can go to one of these spots and they'll actually feel the movement. They'll feel a spinning sensation around them. Some vortices are very small, and insignificant as far as having anything you can do with them to influence the Templar complex. Others are large. Just like you have in the human body, actually you have 15 primary chakras, but in the New Age movement 7 is a real popular number because they've identified the first 7. The 7 primary chakras that form in the physical body of a human being also form in the planetary body. They're called the 7 primary vortice sites. These are areas in the planetary shields that come out into the geography of the area that shield is over. Excuse me, could you close the door back there, please, so the cats don't get out? Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Now, the vortices in the planetary grids, for example, we have the Sedona vortice that got very, very famous because all sorts of New Age people started to go over there and started to use the energy from that vortice. These are energy feed systems. You can use vortices in a lot of ways. You can use them to increase your health, to gain information. You can do all sorts of things with vortices. But what most people in the New Age movement, even those that are studying Templar mechanics, what they usually don't realize is these are not the most powerful sites. When you have a vortice, look for another site. There's sites called Templar sites. These are sites that are directly connected to control grids in the scalar template. Vortices are not. They emerge from smaller energy conduits that go between control sites. This is where vortices pop up. Vortices, ley lines, axiotonal lines of the planet. The 2 primary, most significant parts of the planetary Templar are the 3 signet sites and then Templar sites. Templar sites can be identified if you kind of tune yourself to feeling the energies around you. These will be places where actually the absence of movement is felt. I don't know if you've ever walked in them. I've actually walked in them before I remembered what they were, before I had the information on the Templar. This site feels really strange. You can feel like this time stands still and expands, kind of weirdness. It's a weird feeling. These are Templar sites that are energetically directly connected to the planetary shields. Now, they don't always. It's only when they activate that you'll get the weird feelings, and only when you're sensitized enough with your DNA activation level that you'll actually be able to really tune into feeling these differences. But these are much more powerful for healing, for expanding your consciousness, and for influencing the planetary Templar than our vortice sites. The reason the discussion of the Templar comes up in relation to the place called Sarasota, Florida, goes back to the word that I used before called signet. There are 3 signet sites on this planet. Bermuda Triangle, South Pole, and a 1/4 mile off the coast of Siesta Key. This has been the way the planetary grids have been for billions of years. Whatever land or water has been in this area has been what's called a Grail point. Now, of the 3 signets that control the planetary shields, or scalar template, and all the energies that run through them, the center signet is the one that controls the other 2 signets. It's the first place where when energy comes in from the Stargate systems, when it's activated, it's the first place that energy hits and then spreads out through the grids. Signet 2 is called the Grail point. Grail is a word, a very ancient word, that basically means window, doorway, or center point. It's a word from the Anahazi language. In our language, it came down as Grail. Quest for the Holy Grail. When the Knights Templar were running around trying to figure out where the Fountain of Youth was in that particular real special place on the planet that they knew somewhere existed because those little discs they had told them it existed, they were looking for the Grail, the Grail point. The Grail point is signet 2, and we're basically sitting on it. When you talk about energy systems that are hugely powerful when they activate, it doesn't matter if you're 25 miles away from them. They're still hugely powerful. Now, it's a 1/4 mile off the coast of Siesta Key. The way, the absolute center, kind of like ground zero of where this is. Now, it's not something you can dig to your heart's content, but you're not going to find stuff under the sand, because it's not like a little marble you can pick up and say, oh, wow, we found the Grail point, This is part of the manifestation template of the planetary shields. It is an energy center and an energy point. What's very interesting is when we begin to learn the real mechanics of the planetary Templar, we start to realize that the macrocosm and the microcosm are directly built on the same thing. This means that the human body, the template that the human body is formed on, is a smaller version of the Templar complex. There's an inner Templar complex inside the body that corresponds directly to the mechanics and the layout of the planetary Templar. There is a Grail, Holy Grail point in the human body that's located at the base of the spine in the first of the first 8 cells that you became when you started out from conception. The first cell. Then it expands, and the first 8 cells are very significant. But it's the first of the first 8 cells that's located inside the tailbone at the base of the spine. It is the regulator of the Kundalini energies, or the life force energies that run through the human body. They're those energies that basically keep your system functioning and keep your consciousness awake in the body. Human bodies have Kundalini energies, which are simply life force currents that come in from the multidimensional spectrum. The planetary body also has Kundalini energies running through it, universal Kundalini, primal life force currents. The Grail point is a point in the planetary grids that is the first place of reception, just like the first cell or the first 8 cells in the base of the spine is the first point of reception for the receiving of energies from the three-dimensional system around us, but also from the interdimensional spectrum once that spectrum starts to become available to people on this planet. During the period that I refer to as the Atlantean period, which ended in 9558 BC, they had partial access to 2 points on the Templar that were somewhat functional. The Templar hasn't been functioning particularly well for the last 200,000 years. But the Atlantean technologies that you hear about, crystal generator technologies and all of those kind of things, they were run. They literally used crystal and different types of stone, of precious stones, because of its properties of how it bent energy and how it affected light and sound. They would use these things to amplify and direct the currents of energy running through the Templar, the three-dimensional currents, but they also had forced open 2 gates on the planet. There's really, the 3 signet points are Stargate points on the planet. There's only 3 primary ones, but they connect to a bunch of others in what's called the Universal Templar Complex, which is if you take the universe and all the space that we see out there when we have our telescopes and things looking out at the outer space, that's just one 3-dimensional system, by the way. There's 5 of those in this harmonic universe time matrix. We are in a situation, and some of you know this because you've been to my workshops, and some of you this probably sounds like totally alien to you. This planet and everything around it and everything we see in outer space exists in one 3-dimensional reality field. That reality field is actually a scalar grid unto itself, a very complex one. That's what our universal and galactic structures are built on. We are part of what's called a time matrix, which is an energy construction that allows consciousness to experience space, time, matter, and individuation. It allows manifestation to take place. In a time matrix, there are 5 3-dimensional systems. 3-dimensional systems give you perception of externalized reality, like we have here, where you have a body that's separate from the space around it and those kind of things. So we're in a position where our Templar is waking up. Our planetary energy center is waking up. Its stargates are going to go into an opening cycle. Well, where does the stargate go? Once it's opened, I mean, gee, do I get to visit Mars, that kind of thing? Yeah, Mars is the least of it. Yeah, that would be a small gate. The primary stargates of the interplanetary Templar complex, which is the one that runs through into the universal Templar complex, goes up through 15 dimensions. It goes up through 5 three-dimensional universes. It goes up through 4 other levels of matter density. In the more sophisticated teachings of the Azurite Temple, we get into explaining something called stair-step creation, which is the process by which a consciousness that exists first in full at-one-ment with Source, Force, God, whatever you want to call that thing that always was, that made everything happen and always does. We do endorse the God concept, but it's not a big Father God sitting up in the sky with a white beard. It's a state of complete union and awareness and intelligence. We all emerged from that state. In fact, we're still existing within it. We just feel like we're separate. There's a process called stair-step creation by which portions of God manifest themselves, choose to experience the reality of externalized manifestation. And there is a process of using the energy of their consciousness, which is in a non-manifest state. There is a process of creating an energy system through which manifestation can take place. Each one of us, originally, before we entered a time matrix, existed in this state of perpetual eternal consciousness. So did our planet. So did everything manifest. We came into individuation through a process of stepping down our consciousness into smaller and smaller packages. Started out as huge and limitless, as we are at one with God, as God, I am that I am. Then moved down into several levels of what's called an energy matrix, which is non-dimensionalized, doesn't give you any outside perception. It's a field of sound. Then we went into a field of light, getting smaller. And then we came down through 4 other levels of matter density to get where we are here. We're in what's called density 1 matter. It's dimensions 1, 2, and 3. It's the type of matter that forms in those dimensional scalar fields. From dimension 15, 14, and 13, that's density 5. Then into density 4, dimensions 12, 11, 10. Then density 3, dimensions 9, 8, 7. Density 2, dimensional current. And you've got some power there. You make it a 4-dimensional current, you've got a lot of power there. In the Atlantean period, they were running 4th dimensional frequency and a little bit of 5th dimensional frequency through the planetary Templar. They were amplifying it and directing it with large crystals. They're called Sirian selenite crystals because they have an affiliation with the Sirius star system. The interesting thing is, when Atlantis went down, 9558 BC, its main center of civilization, there are 5 primary provinces to Atlantis, and then one central kind of control city. The control city was always, in Atlantis and all of the cultures before that knew about the Templar, placed at the Grail point. It was simply a matter of understanding your energy. The central control point of the planetary grids was always the place where the main advanced civilizations would build temples. They built temples, as far as we think of temples, in the shape of perhaps pyramids like in Egypt. They did a lot of those. They also did ones underground. A lot of the ones here were actually subterranean. Here is the core of what was once known as Atlantis. This eventually will be supported by archaeological finds. But Atlantis was not a small little town. You know that Miami Circle thing that somebody brought up before? Well, that was part of the main city. The Bimini Islands going down, they were part of the main city. The Bermuda Triangle area, there used to be land there, where it's ocean now. These were the areas of the main control of Atlantis. But the prime ground zero, where they put the main generator crystals, was at the Grail point, a quarter mile off the coast of Siesta Key. I find it interesting that Siesta Key Beach is known for its world-class sand, that's like 99.9% crushed quartz crystal. And that's not something I came up with. That was like I think they had it analyzed at Harvard University or something for the Tourist Bureau, something like that. Because I've seen it published in like Sarasota promotional literature, that kind of thing. Interesting. Now, I could share what I know, where did that sand really come from? Well, when you implode a large, several-ton crystal generator, you tend to get powder, you know. I'll leave that up to the speculation of anybody who's interested in trying to prove or disprove the point, because it's not that important to me to prove or disprove. When I speak about the seemingly radical ideas that I speak about, I do it with conviction for one reason and one reason only, because I know it as my truth. Now, I'm a person who, I'm very hard to convince of anything. All right? There's this mind that I have that has to analyze the heck out of everything. It could have to do with being born a Virgo, I don't know. But I tend to analyze the heck out of everything before I make any thought commitment to it. The reason I speak with conviction about these things are because since I was born, I came in with memory, reincarnational memory. I came in remembering things before I could speak. I would watch the movies. They would run like movies. I remembered healing animals with my hands and running energy through my body in a way that could actually occur. I remembered various lives, and they still pop up. And this is how, when you start to remember your other selves, you'll go in waves. You know, the first couple of years you might get a whole bunch, and then you won't get any more for like 20 years, and then 20 years later, oh my gosh, a whole new file of reincarnational data pops up. The reincarnational data is stored in the DNA template. And as the DNA template activates, that's when the information stored there begins to translate into data that can be recognized by the conscious mind. I remember living in this spot before. So when I moved to Sarasota, and I moved here, never have seen the place, in this lifetime. I moved here because I was asked to by my mentors. It was before they told me why it was so important. And there were certain levels of information of planetary Templar mechanics that I knew at some point I would be allowed to know, but that it was too soon. I moved down here just because I trust my mentors. And I knew there was a reason that they wanted me here. Didn't tell me why. When I got here, it was the strangest sense of homecoming. And all of a sudden, I started to get very, very intense movies. I mean, these could make like, serial episodes on TV. They'd keep running about living on these sites, of seeing the temples. I could see them so clearly, I could paint pictures of them. I remember who I was, and I remember the people that shared that experience with me. And I have run into many of them since I've moved here. The people that lived on this site in Atlantean times, but even more importantly, 200,000 years ago, when the planetary stargates and the Templar was working at full capacity, where it could pull 12 dimensions of frequency, not just 4 or 5. The memories from that point included the memories of how to run the Templar, because the people who lived at the Grail point were the security team for the planetary Templar complex. The people who lived in other cultures and other civilizations that were taking place concurrently had their own purposes of being and their own things to do with the Templar. But the people who lived on the Grail site or near it had incarnated there for a reason. Because even if they didn't remember, once they got into a body, they were there to help protect it and to help run it properly. That means one of the little secrets about Sarasota is that the people who are here, there's something about themselves they don't know yet. They're here for a reason. It doesn't matter if you were born here. But there's a call being put out right now. There's a call in frequency, not somebody standing there saying, hey, yo, come on down. But it translates into the same thing. The Grail point began its activation cycle on January 1st, 2000. It will progressively grows stronger in the energies that it transmits and synthesizes, one of the wonderful things it's going to do, it's going to affect the water that's over that point. It kind of makes me chuckle when I think of the old legends of looking for the fountain of youth. It was always attached to the quest for the Holy Grail. The waters of the Gulf of Mexico, particularly in the area of Siesta Key, and it goes down further. It goes down to like Fort Myers area and up a bit north, are the strongest radiating frequencies or radiating points for the frequencies of the Grail. The Grail is the only place on the planet that is capable of holding what is called a 12th dimensional pulse. D12 frequency, dimension 12 frequency, is the first level of non-polarized frequency. Everything down below it is electromagnetic, particle, antiparticle. It's polarized. D12 frequency is a unified frequency. It's omnipolar. Actually has both poles, but it is one as a unit. Is the strongest healing current that can come into 4 densities of matter. That current, the way the Templar works, when the Templar begins to activate, is that current of 12th dimensional frequency comes down through a series of interconnected energy systems that run through different star systems, through the gates, comes down through the solar light spectra, because the sun represents Stargate 4 in the Universal Templar complex. So that is the gate that feeds universal life force energies, the interdimensional spectrum, into our system. The one place on the planet that can receive that first current of non-polarized energy is the Grail point. The waters surrounding that point will begin to pick up on their template level a 12th dimensional subharmonic, it's called, a small charge of 12th dimensional unified frequency. The way a body is structured is electromagnetic in nature. The way a body heals is by bringing together certain elements. It actually has to do with particle and antiparticle fusion, which is, by the way, the process by which ascension of the physical body occurs. We won't go into that right now. But if you put a physical body into water or drink water that has the D12 frequency carried within it, it begins to activate and accelerate the natural healing processes in the body, beginning to restore the body's template. Quest for the Holy Grail, quest for the Fountain of Youth. Well, it's awakening, and it's awakening here in Sarasota, Florida. I was asked to come here to begin bringing the teachings of the Templar here, and also to, when the time was right, which it just has been, because I've been here for a year but kind of hiding. Nobody knows me. I've been doing workshops, all over the place. We've gone to Egypt, Peru, and England, and a lot of New York City workshops. But I was kind of keeping a low profile here because I really just wanted to be and kind of hide and not be public. But I was asked to bring the information to the people of Sarasota as well. Because what's going to happen with that Grail point is it's going to begin broadcasting frequency through the planetary grids. That is going to hit the DNA templates of certain people who have incarnated specifically to serve as the security team because of the reincarnated members of the old security teams. Also, people who are in need of healing. Those frequencies will come and affect their bodies through the grids, and they will get an urge to go to this place called Sarasota, Florida. The information is also getting out there. The Sarasota, Florida is the point of the Holy Grail. When that starts to circulate in the New Age communities, it's going to be very interesting for the people of Sarasota. Just like it was very interesting for the people of Sedona when their vortices activated. There's going to be an influx of people here that won't even know me. Won't be because of me. But they're going to be called here. Some already have been. There's actually been subtle calls or frequencies being transmitted from the Grail point for the last 20 years, but very subtle ones. It wasn't fully activated then. It was just doing its three-dimensional thing. People, it's kind of funny. There's one thing. When I first moved to Sarasota, some local resident said something really funny to me, and it took me a second to get the joke. He said, "Do you know what Sarasota's city sport is?" No. No. Well, baseball, football, I don't know. I said, "Wheelchair races." I kind of went, oh, okay. You're referring to there's a lot of older people here. It took me a while. It's interesting that would happen. Because when people get older and their bodies start to fail them, they're moving through a couple of changes. One is a place where healing needs to happen more. And two, they're getting ready, be it 20 years away or 2 years away, for transition. The Holy Grail point, the Grail, is the point on the planetary grids where, let's say, the veils are the thinnest between here and the higher dimensions. The higher dimensions are where your consciousness goes after you drop your body in death. This point is a natural point that older people who are starting their wind-down cycle and getting ready for their transition will gravitate to. Because from places like this, but this is the most powerful place on the planet because of its significance in the Templar, this is the easiest place to cross over clearly from. So it's kind of interesting to notice the seemingly mundane aspects of what Sarasota has been in relation to the knowledge that I have been privileged to understand. It's interesting to look at the correlations. Someone here also told me that Sarasota is the lightning capital of the world. I don't know if that's actually true, but I know it's one of them. The center? The capital? I know it's one of the.
The second most in the United States, Colorado, is.
Okay.
It's kind of a competing.
Right. Okay. Well, the Grail point fully activates. That's another little thing. The little Crystal Beach issue, the little lightning capital issue. All of these things would be characteristic of a main energy center on the planetary Templar complex. What's nice is you don't have to live in Sarasota, though it's a beautiful place to live. I'm so thrilled to be here. I used to live in northeastern Pennsylvania, and it's cold up there in the winter. Not that it's not real cold right now here, but there are ways, if you learn to use the energy systems in your body, and you don't need a laboratory with a bunch of chemicals and test tubes to learn to run your body. Hate to tell the scientists. You need to use your mind and realize it generates scalar fields every time you think a thought. You can direct energy with your mind if you know the parts of your own anatomy inside, the energy structures of your own template. You can use them to connect with the planetary template. There are ways that as this Grail point opens, that no matter where you live on the planet, because the Grail point is the central point of control and power for the whole grid, anybody, anywhere, can learn to pull energy from it. It will be strongest when you're in proximity to it. And this strength will be increasing progressively between now and 2017. The reason for that is because the gates are opening, stargates are opening. And simply put, that's called a stellar activation cycle. Last time a full stellar activation cycle took place on the planet was 210,216 years ago. That's what the records in those little holographic discs tell us. Some interesting things happened back then that weren't good. There was a fight over who was going to control the Stargate. And certain forces came in and messed up the natural operation of the Stargates, and it put the place in a pole shift. It was a mess back then. That doesn't have to happen this time. That's why the security team always reincarnates and comes to the Grail point during times of stellar activation cycles. And that's what we're in now. It's kind of funny because there's such a huge amount of data that it would take. And I could do it with what I've been taught. It would take me probably 2 or 3 years to put together a program to show the mainstream scientists what scalar mechanics are really about in their language. I'd have to study their language of, what they call particles and those kind of things. It translates. I just never studied physics down here. I know physics from a very ancient place, and I've been studying the physics texts that go with the ancient civilizations. If they could realize the significance of what is taking place right now, it would be world headlines. This is going to change everything for us. It's going to make free energy systems available. It's going to make spontaneous self-generated healing available. And guess who's going to have a real problem with that? The medical establishment, the pharmaceutical establishment, everybody else's establishment that's built on making sure we're sick and have to go to them and pay money for it. Electric company and people like that aren't going to be real happy either. If it is true, which I know it is, you don't have to know. They'll come to you or not. But if it is true indeed, that our Templar is activating, and for the first time in our, since 200,000 years ago, long before our recorded history, we are going to have access to power that will heal our bodies if we know how to use it. And if we learn how to use it and run it through our bodies, we will be able to create technologies that are in harmony with the natural laws of universal unified field physics, which are the spiritual laws upon which matter manifests. There is no separation between spirituality and science. What's called science on this planet is nothing but a shell of what science once was. Because a science that does not recognize that it has a soul is simply nothing. It's intellectual masturbation. That's a very strong word to use, but it's true. You can play with your mind as long as you want, but you're not going to get out of your mind or any place else if you don't let your spirit come into the process. I think for this lecture tonight, I just wanted to point out why Sarasota is so important. Now, in a little while, I'm going to take a little break and get something to drink, but I'm going to run a meditation for those of you who would like to join me. It's going to be a meditation. Now, when I do meditations, when the Azurite people do meditations, these are not just fun little things to do with your mind. You know, they're not just little journeys you can make your mind go on. You can do that. But if there's a journey or a scenario, there's a really secret, neat thing happening behind it. Every image you hold in mind, every thought you think, generates either a light or sound pattern. Those light or sound patterns translate into the body's internal Templar as mathematical instructions. This is what's happening in the New Age movement. There's all sorts of meditations out there. You know, go here, go there, do this with your energy, do that. Which is interesting, because some of them are wonderful. But what's scary is if we realize that what those images and little journeys we take with our mind are about, if we realize these are sending mathematical programs to the Templar within our body that controls how our metabolic rates work, how our Kundalini works, and how the rest of it works, that's scary. Who's given us this stuff? You know, like when we teach meditations or things like that, we teach scalar science along with it. So you realize that when you're saying, okay, I'm going to visualize a large blue flame now, and I'm going to put myself in the middle of the blue flame, you realize you're doing something with frequency to your body. Because we've been gifted with the teachings from the Melchizedek cloister that allow us to understand how frequency works in the embodied Templar, when we do meditations and journeys, they're meant to assist the natural function of your embodied Templar. They're meant to help you open your inner Holy Grail. There are others out there that are actually being given technique by some of those other forces I talked about that really don't want people to learn how to manage themselves. They're actually giving techniques that sound nice and they can take you on fluffy little journeys, but they're sending mathematical codings into the body that are blocking the Kundalini and blocking DNA template activation so you can't get the higher consciousness in. So it's time, as our race walks in to one of the most phenomenal things that has happened on this planet in 200,000 years. And here we all sit, everybody's like, watching their TV and going to work every day, and, just mainstream people don't know. And their ideas are so far away from where they would even want to know that they probably won't get it for a real long time. But the people who are willing to listen and learn about the mechanics of the Templar, you will have a resource available to you that wherever you are, you can begin to draw energy, frequency, you can begin to amplify your own higher dimensional thought patterns so you can hear them from here, your higher self parts. Gets into one more thing that I wasn't really going to go into until tomorrow, but I'll do it today just a little. When stargates open, if it's true that there's these other 4 universes that take place with our own, well, we live here. Anybody live there? When we put that question in next to the question of, wow, were there really ancient civilizations that were advanced on this planet? Builds a little energy behind what might be happening here. The advanced civilizations that used to live here became advanced because they had some help. The New Age movement people tend to know about this. They call them the angels. There's angel contact happening, and it's true and it's real. Interestingly, the people in the UFO movement don't believe in angels. They believe in ETs. What's kind of funny, and sad really, is that they're talking about the same thing. The word ET is misleading because it makes people think of, like, ET, phone home, those kind of things. It makes you think of things in silver spaceships and solid matter physical forms and those kind of things, which can be very misleading. If we're dealing with levels of matter density that are different from our own, like when we go to density 2, semi-etheric, it's about half as dense as here. A being from there visits here. It can take on physical form, but it's more ethereal. It seems to radiate light. There are angelic civilizations. On Sunday, the workshop that we're going to do there, after we go through some very intensive stuff tomorrow, we're going to get down to a concept called the angelic human. In our ancient cultures, the advanced cultures that were once here, there was something that made them advanced, and it wasn't technology. Compared to ourselves, they were advanced because they had more DNA strands activated, which meant they could hold more frequencies of consciousness of their own souls, oversouls, and higher parts. They were part of our race. We're all connected. They were human too. The original human imprint had a 12-strand DNA pattern. We're operating, well, science says we're operating on 2, but there's actually 3 templates involved, or we wouldn't be able to see 3-dimensional reality. We're operating on 3 strands. Because of that, we have something called single vector consciousness. We can perceive one time vector, linear time vector. In the ancient of days, they had anywhere from 9 to 12 strands activated, walking around in physical bodies. They could manifest and demanifest at will. They're what's called avatars, or Christed beings. The human form, hate to disappoint Darwin, was created as an angelic race. In density 2, we came here about 250 million years ago, this particular tribe of fully human 12-strand beings. There was a de-evolution process that took place since we've been here. We had a lot of help de-evolving. There's a potential now that has not been available for 200,000 years because the planetary grids were not activated. We have the ability, if we learn how, to use the energies of the Grail point to begin regenesis. It's called bioregenesis of the 12-strand DNA pattern. That means even if you were born, because most people on the planet right now are not born with a 12-strand imprint, the template to even have it happen, you can regenerate it through the Grail point. It can carry dimension 12 frequency, and that's what you need to reset that template in your body. It's not that hard either. It's a matter of using your mind to run energy in very specific ways and knowing your parts. When I do the exercise tonight, the meditation, we're going to go take a little visit with our minds to the Grail point. We'll use symbolism that translates into specific mathematical codes in the body that will begin to allow your body systems to open, to draw energy from there on your own. We have a whole system called the Cathara Biospiritual Healing System that gets into the inner Templar mechanics of the body. And it's only level 1 that we have. That's a 211-page book. That's very intensive. And it not only shows you where your chakras are and your meridian lines and things, it shows you where your Kathara grid is, that core, those core 12 points in the body that regulate and create the rest of the template for the body, just like the planet has them. There are 3 inner stargates in the body, and there's a Grail point in the body. When you learn to activate those, it creates what's called Master's Kundalini activations, which means bringing more of the natural life force currents, the interdimensional currents, up in through the body, which allows the DNA template to activate more quickly, and those dormant strands can come back to life. And with them, your perceptions and your consciousness will change. It will open and expand, not all at once. You can do one of these exercises and you may feel nothing the first time. The first 10 times you may feel nothing. The first time you may get zapped. You may just feel energy all of a sudden. It's all individual, depending on how your own inner Templar is working. But I want you to know that when we do meditations and prayers and those kind of things, they're not done from the usual space of consciousness that, say, the other churches that like to teach dogma are doing. Because we don't teach dogma. You don't have to like us. You don't have to believe a darn thing we say. We still love you. That's okay. But when we do any type of ritual, it's with a conscious knowledge of how the inner body systems work and how the planetary body systems work in relation to our time matrix and in relation to that source of all energy and consciousness that's called God. This information isn't mine. I'm not some big brain that incarnated down here and knows it all. I don't know it all. In fact, I know so much that I know how much I don't know. Tons and tons. I'm a student, just like anyone else. I'm tremendously grateful for my teachers who shared with me the knowledge that they have. Why do they have that knowledge? Because they've been guardians and keepers of it for many thousands of years in their family lines. And there was going to be a time when that knowledge was to be released. It was sacred knowledge, and guarded knowledge. The time was when the next Stargate opening cycle was to come to this planet. Stargate opening cycle can happen once every 26,556 years, but it doesn't always. Depends on the condition of the planetary Templar. It's been 200,000 years, 210,216, since the planetary Templar could hold a Stargate opening cycle. And now is the time when the information is being given back to us, if we're willing to learn. The people who will learn will be able to teach themselves amazing things, because you will find the higher parts of yourself more and more and more. They're always there. We have a soul. We have an oversoul. We have an avatar level. We have a stack of 15-dimensional levels of consciousness that belong to us. Each one of us has them. To get them into the body, you need to activate the DNA strands that go with those levels of consciousness. This is some of the things we teach. So, for the workshops that we're going to be, some of you are going to be attending and others of you are just here for the lecture, we're going to cover some master's level things tomorrow that deal with, how do I sum this up easily? Deal with state-of-the-art information on events that are taking place in relation to the angelic kingdoms and their perspectives on our planet having a stellar activation cycle. It's going to culminate in us being asked to assist with helping the planet to wake up. That means helping the planetary Templar complex energies to run smoothly. Tomorrow we're going to cover some techniques that will lead up to something called running a rainbow web circle. By the end of tomorrow, we'll know what the heck a rainbow web is. It's a set of frequencies that are very high frequencies. In the meantime, I will let everybody have a break because I've been standing and you've been sitting for quite a while. And then before you leave, I would like to turn the lights low, because I find whenever I do meditations personally, the less outer distraction I have, the more I can focus inside. So I tend to like to at least keep the lights a bit low. I may turn some of the sparklies off, and I'll just take you through one of these. Now, when I do meditations like this, you will notice there will be times when I teach workshops where I walk around and I will read to you, or somebody else from the Azurite Temple will read to you a set of steps. Sometimes we'll do it that way. There are other times when I am asked to just let it move through me from my own higher levels of consciousness. It's going to be one of those tonight. I know, and I've been progressively getting in touch with, a part of myself that understands the mechanics of the Templar in such complicated ways that my little brain can't hold it, where I just can bring pieces in, over periods of time. And there are times when I can simply stand in the moment and let it move through me. Very different effect than what's called channeling, just so you know. I don't do channeling because in this day and age, when there's a lot of interdimensional forces trying to tell us things, some of which is true and some of which isn't, channeling, unless you know how to seal your biofields, can be dangerous. But every one of us has the right and the ability to draw information. You can call it channel if you want, but then that kind of gets confused with people who are talking to ETs and angels and all sorts of other things that some of them would be better off not talking to. You can draw data. I call it download from your own higher consciousness. That's what we teach. There's a technique that before I do any, what I like to do with the group, before I do any type of meditation work, is called the Maharic Seal. Maharic is a word that refers to the 12th dimensional frequency. It's also, now the 12th dimensional frequency corresponds to what is called the Christos, or the field of liquid light, of non-polarized reality. From the 12th level down, you have polarity. At the 12th level, you don't. You can bring the frequency temporarily of the 12th dimension, now that the planetary grids are activated where they can hold a 12th dimensional subharmonic. You can do a Maharic Seal, which is something, now some of you know this and some of you have not heard it, that's why I'm going over it again. It's a simple technique, has several steps, that allows you to bring up, literally in your auric field, a pillar of frequency that connects you to your 12th dimensional level of consciousness. And anything, which is called your Christos template, by the way, your 12th dimensional level of consciousness. We all have one. We all have the potential to be Christed beings. The person who became known as Jesus Christ was a being who came in with 12 strands activated to reset that ability within the genetic codes here on the planet. Now, we're not going to turn into Christ overnight. I don't think I'd want to either. An awful lot of responsibility. But what we can do is bring in the frequency, the natural birthright that we have of the 12th dimensional frequency. When you do this, whether you're giving psychic readings or whether you're using a pendulum, whether you're going to a healer to have energy work done, any type of activity that involves opening your bioenergetic field of chakras, you are exposing yourself to potential dangers if you do it without a Maharic Seal. Now, this wasn't taught before this year, because before January 1st, you couldn't use a Maharic Seal on this planet. For the last 200,000 years, you could not use a Maharic Seal on this planet because the grids could not hold a full D12 activation, a full stellar activation cycle. This is one of the gifts that we get as the planet goes in to activating its Templar. So I'll probably have someone read that, and I think that's going to be in the book that goes with this. I have to see, the book is on its way into manifestation at the moment, somewhere between the computer and the printer. I'll ask, I think, Phil, do you want to run the Maharic Seal in a little bit? I'm going to let them, get up and use the bathroom or something if they want to for a few minutes. But if you do that, then I will go right into going to the Grail technique. And this will be the beginning, because there's going to be techniques given through the workshops where we learn how to use that energy much more specifically. The objective of using the energy is to be grateful for the gift that God or Source, however you want to call it, is giving us in allowing us this opportunity to evolve before our own eyes and to take conscious part in the process. Freedom is what Azurite Temple is about. Freedom is why I talk to people about these things that seem strange and wacky. So I hope that you can understand, even if some of the ideas that I present seem far-flung and out there, well, they're out there in higher frequency. I hope you can understand the sentiment in the heart that I teach with. It's because I've found a level of freedom by using these teachings that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world, and I'd die for. because I'm not afraid of death anymore. That's one of the things these teachings do for you. All those things that most people are afraid of just don't affect you anymore. If I could give to you the joy that I have inside because of what I've learned and been able to expand in myself because of these teachings, I would give it to you in a second. But it's only a gift we can give to ourselves with a little help. I'm just a messenger passing on some information that's very old and very useful. I hope this was a good introduction to our workshops over the weekend. For those of you who just joined us for the lecture, I hope you got what you wanted to out of the information. There will be more information available on the sites in Sarasota, Florida, because there are Vortis sites as well here, a number of them. Vortis sites always surround Templar sites. But the Grail point is the big surprise, and it is the most powerful place on the planet, and it will progressively get more so. One little thing I'll add is when the Grail was activated in January, by May, there was enough frequency running through the Grail point where we could do something neat, and we were guided to try this part of what's called Kathara healing that's not in the manual. There's a way to use siesta key in a joyful way that allows you to, it's called the pre-soak. You go and hang out in the water for a bit, and there's certain breathing techniques you can use to bring the D12 charge from the water molecules in to the body to help purify and clear. Then you come out. Some of you were here for this. People were looking at us like we were from Mars. Have like 10 people buried in the sand. This is crystal sand, crushed quartz, amplifies and carries electrical current. You go in the water. There are certain exercises you can do. I mean, you can just go in there and breathe and realize you're pulling in energy, consciously pulling energy from the water. But there are other techniques you can use to advance that process too. And then come out of the water and get buried in the sand and let it amplify, particularly if it's hot. I wouldn't suggest doing it when it's cold. There's one of the things about the timing of this workshop that was like, oh, it's too cold to take them in the water. But we had a group of people do this, and everybody seemed to love it. And when I did it, I was like, wow, talk about amping my energies. I felt the difference. Yeah. I felt so clear and just energized. It was like I could see little happy smiley faces on all of my molecules going, thank you. This is something that I've been guided to introduce in the Sarasota area to people who want to learn. Anybody in the Sarasota New Age community that's interested in learning how to use the interior Templar mechanics of the body to begin being able to utilize the energies in Siesta Key to a more effective, more higher level. We'll be giving classes probably starting in late February for anybody who's interested in them. There's a lot to learn, but you can learn the basics, and that's good enough for starters. You can work with the basics. We also have some programs. One's called Tangible Structure of the Soul. What do we call it? Accelerated Biospiritual Evolution Program. Mouthful. Set of 6 tapes. You work with these tapes, they begin activations of the interior Templar complex in the body. The more you work with those tapes, the more they do that. See, when you're working with frequency, you have to hit critical mass. If you want to make changes, you need to override the old program in the body to have a newer, higher one work. So there are support systems to the things I talk about. I can't introduce you to all these millions of things. We'd be here for the next 4 days without sleep if I just tried to go. And I've done this, or I just roll and roll and roll, and I could have you here till we're all asleep in your chairs, because when I get on a roll, I just keep talking. So I'm going to stop doing that right now. And I'm going to have a bit of break here. And then for those who want to join us we're going to do a world peace meditation. But it'll also be a gift we give to ourselves as well as the planet. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you in a little bit. Maybe a 10-minute, 15-minute break, or how long you want it. Thank you. They're part of a group of techniques called bioregenesis. Now, bio refers to biology. Regenesis means like restart, regeneration. So basically, when we use bioregenesis technologies of any type, and they're pretty simple to use, it's just knowing how to move your mind, and if you can, imagine a color and imagine moving this and, just moving things. Picture something, move it here, do this with that energy. It's a simple way to begin interacting directly with your body's template. Now, the Maharic seal is the standard first, before you do anything else, one that we always give to people because it's very, very special. This was the technique that was not available on this planet for the last 200,000 years because it requires the planetary grids to hold a 12th dimensional subharmonic, which did not happen until January 1st. So it was after that that we were given the ability to use this technique. The Maharic seal is not something from the outside that you put into your body. The Maharic seal is actually, if you would look in an auric field, and if you could see it from about the 11th dimensional level, some people could see it lower, you would actually see a pillar of pale silver light forming in the bioenergetic field, in the aura, around the body and permeating the body. That is what's referred to as the Maharic seal. It's a pillar of light. It's a waveform that when you activate, if you fully activated your 12-strand DNA template right now and became a fully 12th dimensional conscious avatar, a Christed being right now, that would be the natural form of your bioenergetic field. All of the divisions in the auric field, when you activate the 12-strand pattern, progressively transmute into a unified field of hydroplasmic energy, which is the D12 non-polarized frequency, which is equivalent to unity consciousness as far as the consciousness goes. It's the Christos template that we're activating. We all have one, but we haven't been able to activate it directly for 200,000 years because we needed the grids on the planet to be able to pull that frequency. So when we use this technique, you're not doing something foreign or unnatural to your body. The technique is called the temporary Maharic seal because right now you can't sustain a full 12-strand activation. There's a lot of people in the New Age movement running around there and say, I have all my 12 strands activated. Mm-hmm. You know what? Unless they can float, disappear at will, walk on water, and several other things like raise the dead, they don't have their 12 strands activated. They only think they do. Okay? It's a whole procedure to activate your 12 strands. Now, with the Maharic seal, what it's really for is to assist in the process of accelerating DNA activation so you can more rapidly incorporate your higher dimensional spiritual identity. It has a little fringe benefit. When the Maharic seal frequency is in your bioenergetic field, nothing from dimension 1 up to dimension 12, anything with polarized consciousness, cannot infiltrate your field while you have a Maharic pillar around you. So, in this day and age, when there's a lot of interference coming from the middle dimensional spectrum, because our Templar is activating, this is used by the Azurite Temple as a protection device, but it's also a device that simply stimulates your natural ability to hold a Maharic seal. It's temporary because it will work and hold for a period of time, but because your DNA can't fully activate to 12 yet, the body and the energy field around you can only sustain that 12th dimensional frequency that you're going to draw in only for a time. So it will dissipate in the field, and the fields will go back to their normal. If you're involved in any kind of activity, be it healing work, like if you do Reiki or anything like that, if you do channeling, if you do psychic readings, if you talk to angels, any of that kind of thing, if you do it after you do a Maharic seal, it'll A, amplify the effects of everything you're doing. B, if there's any distorted frequencies in what you're doing, like if you're healing and you happen to have a DNA template distortion from 300,000 years ago that you don't know you had, you're transmitting that into somebody's field. You use the Maharic seal first, it will realign that. The D12 frequency has the power to realign all the frequencies below it into their natural organic pattern. So it is a synthesizing frequency that will help you to clear your fields. It will help you to amplify your consciousness. It'll help you to be able to see higher frequency. If you happen to be able to be good at psychic reading or something and you can see D4, the next dimension up, this will take you up into D6 within about a year if you actually use it. So there are things that this will do for you that can, I find it wonderful. I use it all the time just to, when I want to say, when I'm speaking before a group, if I just want to be centered in my, divine presence, just to let Source move through me, I simply run the Maharic seal really fast. This is like when you get used to it, there's steps you have to do. The more you do them, the more the body understands the program and just starts to click into it so you can do it like in 3 seconds. So this is this is the short version, but it's still several steps that we'll go through. But I just want you to understand, it's not something that, ooh, should I do that? Is it going to like do something to me that's not natural, you know? It's only stimulating what's naturally yours. Okay? It's something that's internal, that when you fully activate as a 12-strand being, you will have that permanently, and you'll never have to do a temporary Maharic seal again. You know? But in the meantime, it's a way to strengthen your fields. It will help you increase your health, your immune system. It will help you in just about anything. If you want to concentrate, if you're working on a project at work, or if you're getting fatigued at work and you have to deal with people, just take a minute out and just run the Maharic seal. Let the energy move through you, and it will energize you. So I love this technique. You know, I don't like the fact that I have to think about it, you know, because there's a million other things that I'd rather be doing with my brain because I'm always over busy. But when I get into a space where, okay, 3 weeks go by and I haven't bothered to do my Maharic seal, and I wonder why I'm starting to get grouchy and just fatigued and things are bothering me a little more. I'm so used to getting in that space because I used to use it a lot that when I don't do it, my fields start to feel it. They start to lose frequency and they start to go down a bit. So this technique, I just want you to know, it's perfectly safe, and it's also a technique that if you're dealing with anybody else's energy work, I would recommend using it. Because if there's any distortions or manipulation happening, and see, humans don't know if there's astral distortion coming in. You know, we're not trained yet to tell. This is part of the stuff that we train people to do, is to be able to scan the fields and see if anything that shouldn't be there is, you know, trying to mess with people. This will work for protection, but its main purpose is for acceleration of spiritual and DNA development. So I just wanted you to know that before Phil reads.
The Maharic Seal and the Liquid Light Cleanse. Now, begin by closing your eyes and visualize the image of a flat, two-dimensional line drawing, six-pointed Star of David, the Merkaba star, made of white light, stationed at the 6th chakra on the inside of your forehead. If you cannot yet generate inner visualizations, simply imagine that the symbol is there. Continue to visualize or imagine, and move the white Merkaba star over toward the left in your inner field of vision. In the center of your inner field of vision, visualize or imagine the image of another Merkaba star, made of a dark silver light. Observe or imagine the two Merkaba stars in your inner field of vision, and then slowly move the images toward each other until they have merged into one Merkaba star symbol made of pale silver light. The pale silver double Merkaba star symbol is called the Hierophant. It is the scalar wave template that governs the release of phase lock on the Maharic shield. Now, visualize or imagine the Hierophant symbol clearly in mind. Then shift your attention to the sound of your breath. Take several slow, deep breaths. On the next exhale, use the force of breath to forcefully push the Hierophant down from its position at the 6th chakra through the central body current and into the Earth's core. Take a few more slow breaths while visualizing or imagining the Hierophant symbol in the center of the Earth's core. Imagine now that the Hierophant begins to spin in the Earth's core, the dark silver Merkaba star and the white Merkaba star spinning in opposite directions. Spin the Hierophant progressively faster and faster until it takes on a life of its own and suddenly pops and expands to form a pale silver sphere of light spinning in the Earth's core. Observe the pale silver Hierophant sphere spinning in Earth's core. Then visualize or imagine that a huge horizontal pale silver spinning disk emerges out from the Hierophant sphere, forming a massive pale silver disk of light, spinning throughout the Earth and extending outward into the atmosphere as a rotating horizontal plane. While remaining aware of the planetary Maharic shield spinning on a horizontal plane throughout the Earth's body, return the focus of your attention to the spinning silver Hierophant sphere rotating at Earth's core. You will now use the Hierophant sphere to activate your personal Maharic shield and release the 12th dimensional pillar of light within your bioenergetic field. Take several slow, deep breaths while visualizing or imagining the Hierophant sphere spinning in Earth's core. On the next inhale, draw the Hierophant sphere up from the Earth's core with the inhale breath, forming a pale silver cord about 6 inches thick trailing behind the Hierophant as it rises to the 12th chakra, 6 inches beneath your feet. One end of the silver cord remains rooted in Earth's core. The other end is attached to the Hierophant sphere and follows its movement. Visualize the 12th chakra as a small transparent disc about 3 inches in diameter, positioned 6 inches below the feet. And stop the movement of the Hierophant in the center of the 12th chakra, imagining the sphere beginning to spin, and visualize the diameter of the 12th chakra disc expanding to about 6 inches in diameter as the Hierophant spins at its center. Take a few slow, deep breaths as the Hierophant spins in the center of the 12th chakra. On the next inhale, draw the Hierophant sphere up from the 12th chakra, through the central body current, and up to the 14th chakra, 36 inches above the head. And as the Hierophant sphere rises, visualize the 6-inch thick silver cord drawing up through the 12th chakra and farther up through the central body current, following the path of the Hierophant sphere to the 14th chakra. Visualize the silver cord as a long, thick, pale silver cord of light running from the Earth's core through your body and out the top of your head, connecting to the 14th chakra, 36 inches above the head. Take several deep, slow breaths while imagining that you can feel the sensation of this massive current of clear, pure energy running through the center of your body. On the next exhale, push the spinning Hierophant sphere down through the central body current, while leaving the top end of the pale silver cord attached to the 14th chakra, 36 inches above the head. Move the Hierophant down through the 12th chakra 6 inches beneath the feet, and stop the Hierophant 6 inches below the 12th chakra, a position about 12 inches below the feet. This is the location of the Maharic shield within the morphogenetic field of the body. Breathe slowly and visualize the Hierophant spinning progressively faster 12 inches beneath the feet, until the Hierophant takes on a life of its own and suddenly pops and expands to form an expanding horizontal disk of pale silver light spinning 12 inches beneath the feet. Feel this disk as a circular platform 3 yards in diameter below the feet. Call to mind now the image of the massive horizontal disk of pale silver light spinning through the Earth's body, the planetary Maharic shield. Imagine the sensation of the large spinning pale silver platform disk spinning 12 inches beneath your feet. Your personal Maharic shield. Breathe slowly and deeply while visualizing or imagining a massive rush of pure, cool, pale silver energy running from the planetary Maharic shield up through the pale silver cord and into the personal Maharic shield 12 inches beneath your feet. And breathe as this energy runs, filling your Maharic shield to its energy holding capacity. And when your Maharic shield has received as much pale silver energy as it can hold, it will take on a life of its own and suddenly pop and expand upward into an oscillating pale silver pillar of light, surrounding and permeating the body, a tube of light extending beyond the body about 18 inches and running from the Earth's core to the 14th chakra, 36 inches above the head. Feel the reality of your body encased in the cool, refreshing, pale silver pillar of oscillating light. And take a few slow, deep breaths, and imagine the energy from the pillar emanating through all of your body cells. Your bioenergetic field is now sealed with a protective barrier of 11th and 12th dimensional frequency, the Maharic seal. As the pale silver pillar of light oscillates around you, place your attention for a moment at the 13th chakra in Earth's core and inhale a final spark of pale silver light from the Earth's core, drawing the spark up through the pale silver cord into the main vertical channel of the Cathara grid and into the center of the 4th heart chakra. Breathe slowly and easily, while visualizing energy from the silver spark radiating throughout the embodied 12-tree Cathara grid, filling it with pale silver light. And when the Cathara grid has reached its energy holding capacity, the 12th chakra will automatically contract to decrease the flow of silver light from the Earth's core. And as the 12th chakra contracts, the planetary Maharic shield stops spinning and transmitting energy through the silver cord, returning the silver cord to its dormant state. The Maharic seal, pale silver pillar of light, will remain in your bioenergetic field between 1 and 3 hours. Over a 3-month period of frequent, consistent daily practice of this process, the Maharic seal will self-sustain in your bioenergetic field for 12 to 14 hours. Now, as you feel ready, return the focus of your conscious awareness back to the room and allow your eyes to gently open. This has been the Maharic Seal and the Liquid Light Cleanse.